Welcome to What If I Don't Like It with your host, Katie Baldessaro. This episode's guest is going to be Brett Kelly, and the film discussed will be the 1995 crime thriller, The Usual Suspects. Welcome to episode 7. We are joined this time by a close friend of mine, someone I get to see once a week when we play D&D, so that means that they're good people, Brett Kelly. And we're going to talk about a movie that, people are not surprised to hear that someone hasn't seen The Usual Suspects. What they're surprised to hear is that someone has managed to not see it and not hear the ending to it. So they haven't had the twist ending spoiled, which is a big spoiler alert for you if you're listening to this episode and you yourself have not seen The Usual Suspects and do not know how it ends. If that is the case, feel free to continue to listen to just about the halfway mark where we take the break and watch the movie. Then you should watch the movie yourself, because when we come back, we will spoil stuff. And it is genuinely such an interesting script with such a wonderful twist. I know that when you get to the second half, you'll hear how I didn't get to experience this movie without knowing the ending. So I have a soft spot in my heart, and I would hate to have someone be robbed of that experience. So that is my little caveat there. I'm going to keep it pretty quick at the top here because we've got another nice long one. Brett and I found a lot of stuff to talk about, which is awesome. We both have ADHD, so we really, we kept it in line as much as anyone can when you have two artists talking about, general art topics as well as movie, and they both have ADHD. I am, of course, still doing movie runtime, so do check me out there. I'm also going to be on Movie Night Extravaganza. We're doing a special live event. I know that all Movie Night Extravaganzas are technically live, but this one is going to be a special live event in that it is going to be on a Sunday. And it's going to be our live telecast along with the Oscars. So you can watch the Oscars and then listen to us kind of give you like a riff track. Will be our MST3K and react to what's going on. You can catch that live there. It's going to be a ton of fun. We did this last year just on a whim, and we were so surprised and so elated with the response that, of course, we're going to do it again. I'm going to be there. Christina Oakes is going to be there. Conan Neutron's going to be there. Forrest Miller will be there. J. Andy World will be there. And, of course, Lauren Kushnard is going to be there. And she's going to be a guest on this show in April. We're going to talk about Green Inferno and the director Eli Roth and just the general concept of what, is called a torture porn, I guess, for a lack of term, horror movies that are mostly very, very graphic violence, and see if there's anything to salvage there. We're going to get into this at the beginning of the episode like we always do, but don't forget to take a look at those liner notes. That's where you'll see the links to Movie Runtime, the links to Movie Night Extravaganza, and of course all the ways in which you can take a look at Brett's art. A lot of his art is visual, so I really encourage you to go take a look at it. It's super interesting. As I say in part 1, I have a tattoo of his art, so you know that I'm pretty money where my mouth is on whether or not I like this stuff. So take a moment, check it out, and we are going to get right on into it.
Keaton always said, "I don't believe in God, but I'm afraid of him." Well, I believe in God, and the only thing that scares me is Kaiser Soze.
Welcome to episode 7. I can't believe it's episode 7 already of the show. We are here to talk about The Usual Suspects, along with Brett Kelly.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to participate. I've been listening from since episode 1, and and we've been talking back and forth, so I'm very excited to get into it.
I'm really excited to have you here. You were one of the first people I told about this idea before it even really got rolling, before anything got taped. So this is always in the making, one of the original crew that was like, yes, do this. This sounds like a great idea. Not only do I want to be on, I will listen as well. So much appreciated.
Oh, of course. I tend to, in our friend group, I do tend to be the person where it's like, if you have an idea, yeah, I'm totally going to encourage you. Like, I'll give you all the golden retriever energy you need to try and get it done. I'll be like, no, that sounds, heck yeah, do the thing. At least at the end of the, do the thing. Just have fun with it. So.
Yeah, people need more cheerleaders in their lives, especially other artists. I think sometimes art can feel competitive even when you're not in the same medium, where you're like, oh my God, the output of that other artist, I don't want to compare myself to that, when in actuality it's a way more healthy and successful way to live if you're just, a rising tide lifts all. If you're constantly telling everyone about how cool everyone else is. And
Yeah.
honestly, there's a lot of people in our friend group that are pretty goddamn cool, if I say so
Yeah.
myself.
There's plenty of hype to go around in our social circles for sure. And also to even highlight your point is that like not only all rising tides raise all ships, but also art can generally be pretty isolating. So like it's really nice to have a reason to interact with your friends and talk about stuff that you like, and that in itself can be reinvigorating or invigorating, whichever you need. So yeah, happy to participate.
And I think a lot of times people keep art from being made because they think it's not perfect. Like you're going to
Yeah.
birth it completely perfect, totally by yourself with no help at all. And so when you can't quite do that, it just stays a daydream. And I think the support of other artists telling you like, hey, it's not going to be perfect. Hey, it's still great if you fail a little is something that you need to hear in order to keep making art. Otherwise you wind up more of a hobbyist.
Yeah. I think you just read my diary. Like as much stuff that I tend to get done in a given year, there's like an embarrassing amount of stuff that either like gets banned to the wastelands of backburnerdom. So like so it's always nice. Like I'm already on like a new hyperfixation that like I've told a select few people about that. I doubt anything will come of it. If anything, the exercise of plotting it out has been fun. But yeah, so like that's happening while I'm also trying to get other stuff done, like doing commissions as an artist and whatnot. So, but yeah, so you saying that was like, oh yeah, no, I know all too well what that means and what that's like.
Highly relatable, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think people who may not know you may not know all the things that you do, because we're talking about primarily your art right now, because you are a graphic designer, fine artist. I mean, the tattoo that is on my arm is designed by you. I know a bunch of us have tattoos that are your drawings, which is really awesome.
Yeah, it's become a bit of the numbers have grown a lot over the last few years, and nothing that I had set out to do. But yeah, I think maybe a couple years ago, someone had made a post being like, "Wait, how many people have like Brett Kelly tattoos?" And I was like, "Oh wow, that's like a lot of people, like way more than I remembered." Yeah. So that's always very nice to know that I don't call myself to be a master of anything. I just I do a lot of work that's kind of hard to describe because I am all over the place. I tend to be a try it out type of person, and I do all sorts of stuff. And but yeah, tattoo design is definitely one of those things where I've accidentally designed more tattoos than I have on purpose.
Yes, I think people see your art and they go, "Yes, a tattoo." It's not like you're specifically designing tattoos. People come at it from a sideways point, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and actually, I've designed probably over 100 tattoos over the course of my artistic career, and I just got my very first tattoo in 2021 to commemorate my 15-year run as a makeup artist and as a haunt actor. So I had to commemorate that from like 2003 to 2018.
Well, I have to say, if people look at you, not seeing the amount of, like, if you were completely covered and couldn't see any of your skin, I would just assume you had a ton of tattoos.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just, I just never, they never stuck. Not pun intended. It's just, it never like, I never had enough money to dedicate to actually getting tattoos. And then B, like, I'm a pretty furry Irishman. Like, so any tattoo that I get, eventually it will just, whatever I get will eventually just become a furrier version of whatever I got. So I'm just like, there's a lot of things going against me aesthetically for getting tattoos, but like I'm very happy with the one that I got, and it was a real nice one. Tyler Chansey from he was at Oxbow in East Hampton for a little while, and now I think he's moved over to I think he's gone over to the east, to like eastern Massachusetts in Boston, I think. But yeah, really good dude. Did an own version of a design that I did. But yeah, tattoo designs. I design my own pins and merchandise, and I take commissions, even though I haven't publicly solicited commissions. I've always had a half to a full dozen commissions right now, and like I do logo design and concept artwork, and like I've done a little bit of everything, and so far nothing's set on fire, so I'm staying the course.
I really love all the stuff you've designed for the RPM Fest.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm still working on this year's. I'm hoping to get it done this weekend. It's just been very last couple years I've having to grapple with aging and needing more sleep and not being able to burn the candle at both ends and then a flamethrower in the middle. So I'm trying to pace myself, and like I'm learning a bunch of new skills to do digital artwork and or brushing up more so, because I mostly do traditional stuff. Like I think the biggest thing that I did is that I made and sold 80 different unique illustrations for the month of October last year, and
Yes,
that was
I
like
wanted to
super
talk
fun.
about those.
Oh, cool.
Yes, the
Yeah.
gourd folk, I love those.
Thank you. Like most successful things I found, for me at least, it was just something that I stumbled into, where like I normally every year I'll do like a very intense drawing a day thing for Halloween. Like it started as Inktober for a couple years back in 2014, and then I kind of got bored with that, and I was like, I want to do my own thing. So I started calling it Fall Hollows, making the Saints of Halloween or whatever. And each one of those drawings would take like 3 to 4 hours back when I had the time and energy, and I wasn't working a lot and like didn't have a lot of life things having to take up my time. And then so I tried doing it this for last year, got to day 4, and then at day 4 I lapsed, and I was like, oh well, you know what, I had been doing this fun little thing where like I had made an enamel pin drop last year for my Billy Jack pins, which are like, I have a coffee shop they're up for sale and up there, and
very cute.
if you just look up Brett's Bounty Board, it'll pop up.
We'll put it in the links too.
Sure, yeah, thank you. But yeah, so like as a little promo thing for the pin drop, I had made like an exclusive 100 pin print run, and for any pin that was made through October, I would give you a little doodle in the backer in the packaging that would be like of a pumpkin person. So like I really enjoyed doing those, and they would only take like 10-15 minutes a pop. Wasn't a big deal. They were just really cutesy. And then once when Fall Hollow started in October, I flared out real quick because I was like, I'm so busy I can't dedicate 3 to 4 hours on an illustration. But let me just keep doing these little 10-15 minute doodles, $10 a pop, and then all of a sudden I could not keep up. Like I would draw like between 4 and 10 a day, and whenever I would post them online on my Instagram, people would just gobble them up, and it was very exciting. It was the first time where I made something that actually appealed to different people. Like normally when I make something like, oh, all my heavy metal friends will like this, or oh, like all my comic book friends will like this, or so on and so forth. But this one, because of the way that they were illustrated, it just appealed. Like I made ones that were like spooky scary, and like, you know, these gourd folk drawings were basically on 3x6 art cards, and they were basically a generic formula of a pumpkin person, like a person with a pumpkin head, a jack-o'-lantern face, and they'd be doing, you know, and I would draw them in various different iterations. Sometimes they'd be like classic Halloween costumes, like clowns, cowboys, witches,
scarecrow,
or then yes, exactly. Or then I did a couple like casual ones where, oh, there's one in like a hoodie with a pumpkin spice latte, or
love that one.
yeah. And then I made like super scary ones too, because of course I have to, because they're like really brutal heavy metal ones. So like I had like little factions of all of my followers, like all the cowboy ones I made their way to Texas, because I had like 3 people out there that were like, you're making cowboy gourd pumpkin people, please send them my way. So yeah, it was really fun. And it was so successful, I'm actually trying to revisit that later on in the year. Like I'm going to be doing a couple more things like that as the year progresses. So
oh yeah, absolutely. It would be insane not to do that again.
Yeah.
There were a few that like, as soon as they came into my feed, I would see that they were already purchased.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit, that's the way to be on the social media as an artist, where you're like, can't even keep these on the shelves. There was one that was very Dark Soulsy too, and I'm like, it sold, and then there were several people after that who were like, just in case that first person doesn't take it, I'm also available. And I was almost like, I wonder if I should get in that queue. No, it's like 5 people deep.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very awesome, and I cannot wait to try and revisit that format again. Like I have a couple ideas for March. I want to do something for summer. Basically, like I have a couple more months that I want to try and take a crack at it, not just with Halloween, but even with. I will do Gourd Folk Fest, that I called it. I will do it again for 2024, but I'm going to expand it from September and October, and I have a couple machinations to kind of play with that a little bit. But I also have a couple ideas that I want to use as an excuse to explore some more of the genres that I like to draw in, because I like to do like gothic fantasy, you know. I like to do steampunk artwork, because like that was like a big thing that like I really I kind of had become like a real big part of like just the stuff that I got involved in the early 2010s,
Mm-hmm.
like all the way through like 2015.
You're published in a steampunk art book, right?
Yes, I was published in the Steampunk Bible by Jeff Vandermeer, who's the author of Annihilation.
Oh yeah, yes. We got to that conversation because I was on Movie Night Extravaganza talking about Annihilation.
Yeah, and that's what prompted me to reach out, because I was like, oh man, like someone else knows Jeff's work, and like I've never met him personally, but he's a really good guy, and like the way that I do work is that I do a lot of commission and contract work, or I'm subcontracted for clients, and then whatever they do with my work, like I'll just hand it off to them, and they'll do whatever they want with it, and then it'll and that's why like that work ended up in the Steampunk Bible. I had artwork that showed up in Steampunked, which was like the reality game show that was on was it on AMC? I think no, Game Show Network.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And then I had some artwork that showed up on like New York Inc. from back in like 2011, 2012, or so on and so forth. And like, yeah, I've done a bunch of stuff like that, which is really fun.
Yeah, it's amazing because I'm going to say that like Brett is very, very good at drawing, and people are like, no, you don't get to get an also. Like, that's enough. We've talked about all these awesome things. I'm like, yeah, well, he's also a voice actor, so do with that too, because you're a really talented voice actor. I get to play D&D with you and reap the benefits of just free voice acting that you throw away to the peons.
I don't. I mean, thank you very much. You're very kind I'm very flattered. It's just one of those things. Like I said, I spent 15 years working at an amusement park, a regional amusement park in New England, and because of that environment allowed me to just tap into a bunch of things and explore, like developing characters. And since I'm old now, I don't really get to do that as much, and I have I got to work for a living. Playing D&D is like scratches that itch that I still have, where I'm like, oh, like I really want to like, still play with those aspects of like coming up with new personalities and characters and testing out new voices and, just playing as someone else. That's always a fun thing to do. And D&D quickly became a facet for that. But yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think anytime you get to use a skill that you have repeatedly casually, you're actually building the skill up very, very much. I know that I'm doing the movie runtime now thing, and it's every day, and it's in front of the camera, and I'm feeling like, oh wow, I'm way more comfortable in these auditions that I suddenly have to tape for things than I was before, because it's just another thing, and you do it all the time, and you're more comfortable now, even if it's not the highest quality art. Just sketching something once a day and keeping that in your muscle memory really does help. And things like D&D are, there's a lot of actors who play D&D, and everybody's like, oh, surprised by this information. It's not really that surprising, is it?
Yeah. And actually, even to throw a spotlight back on you, like congratulations on runtime and how everything's been going.
Thank you.
I was able to catch your live stream the other day, and like I'm super excited that you've been able to kind of make that work on TikTok. Like it's super rad. I'm so happy for you.
It's exactly like the gourd folk kind of thing, where you're like, I'm just gonna do a thing that feels easy for me, because I'm going to do this thing because I'm overwhelmed by other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then people came to it because you're being genuine, and they're like, yeah, I vibe on this. And I didn't think anyone would, if some people watched it, would be fine. But the fact that people are reaching out, that Lala Rewards now wants me to host their trivia night on Discord, I'm like, yes, I love trivia, and I do love movies, and I'm all about this.
That's so rad.
Yeah. And we're both in, we can congratulate, another double pat on the back here. We're both in Starwell Foundation.
Yeah.
Which is something that our friend Alex, who, like, I talk about Alex to people and they're like, is that the same Alex? I'm like, yeah, the FX guy. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
The guy who also wrote that thing? I'm like, yeah. The guy who also did that really successful podcast for a very long time? Yeah, no, 100% that guy.
Yeah, Alex is one of my oldest friends. Like, I mean, you heard, like, I was humbled enough to be the best man at his wedding, and I kind of was able to kind of like explain a lot of that, because like I think, Alex and I go back. Like he's probably one of like my oldest friends from like from the first. Like I even mentioned, like he actually is one of like two people that own like actual comic book work that I've done. Like I've actually, like, he commissioned me to do like an 8-page like comic book adaptation of one of his earlier stories.
Nice.
And he's the only one that has that type of stuff for me. And I've been say for I think like maybe one other person down in Connecticut. But like, yeah, Alex has always been one of my earliest champions. Like, yeah, it's like I've known the dude for going on 20 years now, which is bonkers to think about. Time really flies when
I know,
everything's
right?
on fire. So,
Jeez, especially when 2020 felt like, just a blink, and it's been the last 4 years of our lives.
yeah.
I did want to ask, how many voices do you do in Starwell?
I would have to, if I wanted to be greedy, I'd say 3, but I play 2 characters, and I've done some like just random voice characters or whatever.
Yeah, technically we're all the whaling ship.
No, I wasn't actually. I was really hoping I wanted to be, but yeah, I guess Alex had his own vision of who was on there. I mean, and he made it work. Like, it was amazing. Like, I'm a little jealous that I wasn't, but yeah.
He asked if I wanted to record for the whaling ship, and I said, I want my track to be silence. I want there to be silence added to the whaling ship. That's my eerie bit.
With Starwell though, I played one of the main focused bad guys, or villains, or focused characters, basically, named Melvarmo, an ice-based villain, kind of like a low-level criminal, like not really super powered, but he's devious in his own way. And then I also play Donnybrook, who's kind of like a more of an Irish fighting character, and I kind of strong-armed Alex into that. I was like, oh, you haven't even playing Donnybrook? And I was like, because I really want to play that character. Like, he's just reeks of like Letterkenny for me.
Oh yeah.
It's like I gotta get in on that. So Alex was kind enough to entertain my request. And we managed to make it work.
I absolutely, upon reading the script, was like, no, that's Brett. That's gotta be Brett's voice. I mean, I know that he's playing the main villain, but I also know that this is gonna wind up as Brett.
I'm hoping, like, the greedy part in me definitely hopes that I'm like, oh, I hope there are gonna be other ways for me to goof off and come up with different voices that Alex might want to like throw in a different one. Like, at the one line, the throwaway character that I was in like episode 3, I think. I was like the guard at the junkyard where they find Strong Stanley. It's like, Dave, what do you want? Like, that was it. Like, that was me, and I was like, "Hey, I'm talking to myself. That's fun."
I love the fact that Strong Stanley is just the voice that Alex and his wife do for their dog Merle.
Yeah.
It's just Alex and Danielle's little silly voice for that. And it's so perfect. It really does work.
Oh yeah, that's such a great episode.
Yes.
Yeah. And actually, do you play 2 or 3?
I played 2 characters. I do
Nice.
play 2 characters. Although I did get asked if I could do a kid voice. I'm working on a kid voice in case I get asked again.
Cool.
I'm like, no, I don't experience or go near children. I do the Russian telepathic character, which is sense because I speak Russian, so people do often come to me for Russian characters. Nice. But don't feel bad about asking for Donnybrook, because when I found out that they were doing a like true crime NPR podcast inside the podcast, I 100% texted Alex and was like, I would very much like to be considered. I will easily audition, please. And he's like, you got it. I'm like, yay! Because I do a delicious dish voice. And I just had to.
You hit like certain notes, and the way that you capture that character is so fun and playful.
Thank you.
And the way that it juxtaposes a lot of the story elements that character gets into is so fun.
It was a joy to record those lines. That was a really fun afternoon. Well, transitioning on from talking about basically ourselves. Like, wow, that was hard. We were like 2 ADHD people trying to just focus a little bit here. Let's talk about The Usual Suspects.
Please.
By first asking, why were you... First of all, anytime I talk to people about the fact that we're doing this movie, they go, so does he know the movie at all? And I'm like, no, he does not know the movie at all. And they're just like, oh, what a joy. So exciting. So this first half is going to be a little bit different than other first halves, which is that I'm not really going to give you too much information about the movie because would spoil it, would be not super great. So why haven't you seen the movie, or why don't you know that much about it?
Sure, yeah. You might need to remind me if you have the knowledge on hand, but when The Usual Suspects came out early 90s?
1995. It comes out the exact same year as the movie Heat. a very similar
Gotcha.
style. Like it's a very specific time.
I did not see Heat either. Um,
Oh, shit!
yeah,
Pause, guys. We're switching it. We're doing Heat now.
yeah. So yeah, and I've thought about this a lot after I was kind of doing preamble to it. Is that I think for me, like I'm the oldest of three kids, three Irish sons. So like 2 years apart. So like I think what happened for me is that like I mean in the 90s I was like 10, 11, 12. So I I was just approaching, yeah, I was like 13, like 13, 14, around there. So like I wasn't, and because of the fact that I had younger brothers, my family was, tried to keep us all like, because I was, even though I was 15, I was still I was in an environment that still catered towards, children that were 5 years younger than me, if that makes
Mm,
sense.
yeah,
So it's
fair.
not like, oh yeah, Brett's 15, so we're all just gonna pile into the van and go watch, this hardcore, edgy, like 90, more action, more adult oriented film with our 10-year-old and 12-year-old as our 14-year-old watches on.
This is such a great point because I do want to pin when we come back from having you watched it. I'm going to tell you the story of how I first watched it, and it will juxtapose the points you are making right
Sure.
now quite well. So
Yeah, no,
carry
not a
on.
problem.
I'm
Yeah.
trying not to laugh
Yeah.
very hard. You're right. This is not a movie for kids in any
Yeah.
shape or form.
And so like there was this weird nebulous phase from like in the 90s where like there were probably movies that I very well could have gravitated towards and maybe should have gravitated towards that I just didn't, because of the fact that like like in order to see these movies, you had to go out to a movie theater, or you had to have friends that you would go to a mall with to go see these films with, or whatever. You'd have to, and it was just not an environment that I was really just tapped into at that time. I was very much a homebody. I was a dorky kid that I was just like, and the movies that we would go out to it would be a whole family occurrence. It would be very rare that I would go see a movie by myself or with my friends. And I would argue that I grew up very, very young. Like I watched a lot of cartoons growing up, so like I kind of probably hyper focused on that a lot more when all my other peers might have been focusing more on like those other films and whatnot. So if I had to make a guess, 25 years removed from it, my guess is that's probably why. And then eventually, like when I did finally hop into that genre of film, I think whenever I saw advertisements for it, or whenever I would see anything of it later on, like even growing up, because you'd imagine like I've had 25 years to experience it. Somewhere along the line, I just kind of plinko down into the different subgenres of movies and stuff like that. So I got really into martial arts films for like all throughout my late teens and 20s, and even now, like I still have like a pretty dedicated collection of like old school and new school martial arts films. Like martial arts films are just a thing that I was really big into because I was a big martial arts kid.
Hmm.
So because of that, like new metal, martial arts, like and like skateboarding and like anime, basically, like those were like the four things that really like, and comic books. Those are all the things that kind of surrounded me. And Usual Suspects just really didn't find a touchstone with me during those times.
Yeah, it doesn't really fall into any of those particular genre points. I
Yes.
will agree that if you are into anime, it does kind of keep you out of other things because it is so deep a well to fall into
Yeah.
that you often wind up completely out of other films. And I do feel that there's a valley between cinematic people and anime people.
Mm.
I feel like I'm constantly straddling the chasm, trying to hold hands with people on both sides and be like, look, you're really just ripping each other off. So just join hands and just watch the story and forget whether it's animated or not.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't mean it's going to be shit. I know that if I find something animated I really love, I come to you first because I know you'll also appreciate it.
Yes, most likely. Yeah, if it's something that I've seen, or even not, like I'm always, well, there, like I'm very pointed in the things that I gravitate towards and whatnot. So like a prime example is that like in the 90s when like Pokemon, like when the animated show became popular on television, everyone's like, dude, you watch Pokemon? I'm like, nah, I watched Gundam Wing, man. Like I found that there were gigantic robots that fight. Like I'm gonna watch that. I like
Yeah.
no disrespect to Pokemon. I'm actually more into Pokemon now amongst my friend group than I ever was when I was in high school. Because then I was like, oh, Outlaw Star, like Ninja Scroll, like those were the movies that like I was all about.
Ninja Scroll is a very good one. That absolutely.
And actually, to tie this even back, because I wanted to address the follow up question of being like, how come you never came around to it as well? Is that like in my head, and I say this having no experience to it, so I think somewhere along the lines where I was like, oh, do I want to watch Usual Suspects? And I was like, oh, and I think the last time I ever like made the decision to even entertain the idea of watching it, I was like, oh, Usual Suspects, isn't that just like Reservoir Dogs, but with like just done by a different person that's not Quentin Tarantino? And that's just something that I came up with in my head. No one told me that. That's just a story that I told myself to understand. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know. Like, I've seen commercials.
I think I know why, but go on.
Okay. Well, and then also, like, because internet culture is the way it is, like, I do follow a lot of, like, social media being the regurgitative cesspool that it can be at times, is that, like, there's one thing I know about Usual Suspects, and it's nothing to do with the plot. Like, I'm familiar with most of the actors that are in that movie, but, like, the lineup scene, the famous lineup scene is that like, the behind the scenes story about that, oh, yeah, it's because Benicio del Toro started farting and everyone was laughing and everyone was getting mad, and like that's why it was so like it's such an iconic scene, because it's playing off of like the reality of what's going on, and it's super funny, and like, and I don't know why, but for some reason, like 8 different, like I would scroll through things randomly and that would just pop up on my feed and I'd be like, oh, all right, that's a fun tidbit. Other than that, I have no idea what any of this is about.
Yeah, and it's really the lineup in front of the police lineup is incredibly iconic. It's the poster to the movie. And I got to asking myself, like, why is it so incredibly iconic? And it turns out the way that this movie was written was kind of really backwards.
Oh.
Bryan Singer, who is the director of this and worked with the writer of this, Christopher McQuarrie, to do it. They had just done a film called Public Access, and it was debuted at Sundance in 1993. It won Palme d'Or. It won like best in show.
Wow.
You know, it was so amazing that Kevin Spacey said to Bryan Singer, "Whatever it is you do next, I'm going to be in it. Just send me the script once you write it." So they had no script, but they had a lot of heat, and they were like, "Well, we got to write something." And they really liked the line from Casablanca, where he says, round up the usual suspects. And Bryan Singer had just written an article for Spy magazine titled The Usual Suspects. So they're like, okay, it's going to be called The Usual Suspects. Okay, what's next? And they were doing an interview after Sundance, and they said, what's your next film? And the guy goes, I think it's going to be about criminals who meet each other in a police lineup, because they thought it would be a really cool poster. So it's built out of how iconic that scene was meant to be, although it was written to be incredibly serious. But Benicio, who denies that being the truth of how that was filmed, he said he did not do that, was claimed to have been farting and breaking everybody up. He actually does a very strange accent in this, and I don't want to talk too much more about it. I'll tell you why he does it in the second half.
Sure.
But as a voice actor, you're going to appreciate his choices.
Sure.
And if I had to guess, I think that it wasn't the farting. I think it was the fact that his accent is unbelievably weird. It's almost akin to the voice acting that Jennifer Coolidge did in Best in Show.
Okay.
Where, like, nobody knew she was going to talk that way. She just showed up on set and then in the very first take started talking that way, and every single other person had to like keep their shit together.
Oh, wow.
Because it was like, that's not an accent, that's just you being weird.
Yeah.
But it
I'm
works.
down with that. I do like me some weird cinema, so.
And so there's a really iconic Reservoir Dogs poster, Reservoir Dogs 1993, 1995, that has them all lined up in black and white walking down towards you, but they often remove the background out of it. There's a very easy graphic match between those two posters, and it could be very simple for your brain to go, that's the same movie.
Sure. Yeah, well, it's, for sure, especially having not seen one of them and being like, oh, well, yeah, for sure. And actually, I think watching this now, like so much time after this, I think will be really fascinating, because I think one of the accidental things that kind of happens with the format of this podcast is that you end up watching a lot of stuff, and with recontextualized or where in the past in some cases, and that can really throw a really interesting lens on things. And actually, I think I accidentally got a primer for this too, because not just maybe just a week ago, there was a friend that had a surprise birthday party at Greenfield Cinema, where apparently you can rent out a movie theater and you can play whatever movie you want, and like that's a thing that you can do, which is super fun. And the movie that they chose to watch was True Romance.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, I've never seen True Romance before, because once again, it's like a 1994 movie, like an early.
Oh God, it's so good.
Written by Tarantino, but not directed or whatever.
Oh, rare
and
piece.
Like, I remember watching that, and I was like, oh man, this is really fun. And then my partner, she was just like Babs, also a friend, fantastic, talented individual, very creative,
also voice actress.
Yes, as well. But then she was like, oh, that like the lead, like Christian Slater. Oh, he's in like, he's in Rick and Morty, and he's in like he does all these voice acting. So like that's really fun. Just be like, yeah. Like there was a time where like Christian was like, at a time where like Christian was like on top of like the game, but now because of how time works and because of how selective exposure goes, that's just how people that have not seen his earlier work now see him as.
That's gonna hit some people listening to this as hard as it is hitting me right now. Yeah. The idea that like, oh God, yeah. This is like when people say, I really love that movie music writer, Trent Reznor. And you're like, oh, cool. That's how you know him.
Oh, Trent Reznor. I love the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem soundtrack. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to mention anything. You're like, no pretty hate machine, no downward spiral. That's your first touch point. Well, no, technically my first touch point was the Facebook movie soundtrack. And I'm like, okay, great. With Atticus Ross. And you're like, all right.
Sure.
I mean, like, hey, I bought it. Like, I liked it a lot.
It's good. It's very disarming when somebody's like, Sean Astin from Stranger Things. And you're like, no, from Goonies. And you're like, oh, no, that's a vastly...
Yeah. Oh, no, you mean Raphael from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated show?
Yes. All of these things.
This is a fun game that I sometimes play with my friend group, but not in this particular context where it's like I enjoy, like when you look at like a movie, when you see a movie from from an actor that has a very large catalog, a very large filmography, and then just switching out the characters of knowing where they're from. Willem Dafoe's my favorite to do from that, because you're like, oh yeah, Willem Dafoe, the guy that played Jesus, and then 10 years later played in a movie The Antichrist.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then and you're like, oh no, the guy from Finding Nemo and The Lighthouse.
Yeah, it's 100%. I was looking up Benicio del Toro, who is so young in this that it is amazing.
Yeah.
To be like, how close to the beginning of his career? Not actually that close. Man had been hardworking guy, because he's been working since he was a kid.
Oh yeah.
And if you're a fan of Pee-wee's Big Top Circus,
yeah,
you would recognize him as the dog-faced boy from that.
No way. That's awesome. I live for stuff like this. This is like where I'm like, oh yeah, like that's awesome. Another Pee-wee's like same thing with Lawrence Fishburne, like Cowboy Curtis from Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Absolutely.
Yep.
True Romance is a really good movie to bring up, because if I was going to say that this piece was similar to anything in Tarantino, I would actually pick True Romance, because True Romance has such a great script, and that's really the highlight of The Usual Suspects. Usual Suspects won 2 Oscars. One was for Kevin Spacey's performance. The other one was for the script.
Cool.
It's talked about primarily for how well the script is written. It won so many different awards. It won the Writer Guilds of America. It's in the top 101. It's number 35 for best American screenplays ever written.
Yep.
It's got some crazy ass stuff too. Like it's in the top 1,000 films from the New York Times. And you're like, 1,000? You couldn't edge that down a little bit for me? Like, how many of us see 1,000 films in like 10 years? But, it's, other than that, it's not very similar to Reservoir Dogs at all. I mean,
Sure.
There's a heist in Reservoir Dogs. There's heisting in this as well. So I wouldn't say I wouldn't say nothing is similar, but you will find yourself capable of being like, no, these movies can be dissected to be
Oh,
fine.
sure. Yeah, and I don't plan on watching it with any type of implied narrative or comparing it to anything.
Oh yeah.
I really want to just experience it the way this is. Finally, after 20 years removed, like I know I can finally exercise everything that I learned from my art degree from the University of Connecticut. Like I know how to just remove all immediate bias and just take it as it is and experience it for what it is. So
Yeah. Well, there is a lot of media bias on this film right now in the world that we exist in.
yeah.
Because it contains Bryan Singer and it contains Kevin Spacey. And I did want to
Mhm.
talk about this a little bit up front, just so that we can put this in context. Both of them have a severe string of sexual allegations, lawsuits, and things throughout media, although none of them have resulted in any finalized, like, guilty verdicts.
Mm.
There are so many accusations.
Yeah.
Bryan Singer, I think he did Bohemian Rhapsody, and then the last accusation came out, and they actually took his credit off.
Whoa.
So they uncredited him from the film, and they uncredited him from Dark Phoenix.
Wow.
Because Bryan Singer is the head of Bad Hat Harry Productions, which you probably have heard at the end of television shows. That's one bad hat, Harry.
Yeah.
Yeah, like House was one of their shows. Legion was one of their
Oh,
shows.
wow.
So he actually controls the X-Men IP for an incredibly long period of
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Like, so many of them were him.
Yep. Jeez.
How do you feel about those films? You're a comic book fan.
I think they were really fun for what they were at the time. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of frustrating to like look at it because I'm trying to remember like because Bryan Singer X-Men. I mean was that done through the Sony garb or was that through licensed through Marvel? I cannot remember the.
Ooh, I think it was done through Sony, but I'd have to double check.
Okay, because I mean, yeah, because it's like one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, well if it's the, when the Sony Spider-Man came out and then X-Men came out, like yeah, like that was like the time where I think I definitely watched the first X-Men film. I think I kind of fell off after
There's so many.
that. Like it was kind of interesting. Like I'm like I said, like I kind of set it up. Like I kind of dropped it earlier on where I was like, oh, I'm a big fan of weird cinema. I'm also a big fan of weird comic books. So like, even though I do like comic books, like I wouldn't necessarily like. The last time I routinely read like a Marvel title was like I was like 9 or 10 years old, and basically when I grew up in high school because. The time where I had a Korn T-shirt for every day of the week, basically, and then I also collected Spawn because Spawn was like huge in the heyday. I was more of an image guy, like I'm an image reader. So like I didn't read as much Marvel, I didn't read as much DC until I started work, until later on, until I started doing amusement park type of stuff where it behooved me to be a little bit more knowledgeable on it. And then even in DC's, like I'm like, oh, do you read Batman? No, I read Doom Patrol, and I get mad about it, but I read Doom Patrol because like Doom Patrol is just so weird, and I like reading all the weird stuff, like weird science fiction. So backtrack all that into that, like to refer to that to the Bryan Singer movies. Like I'm not like I enjoyed them when they came out. I don't have them in my collection. I don't look back and I don't think of them as fondly. I mean, I definitely enjoy like probably my favorite movie from that era of comic book films, Spider-Man 2, Blade. And I like Spawn, even though Spawn kind of I like Spawn because it's a movie that I like based on a character I liked at a time when I was really into it. And the soundtrack was amazing, but like I can look at it now and be like Spawn's not that great now. It hasn't held up over the test of time, but for what it was really cool. Like
Absolutely.
I liked it a lot. So yeah. So that's a very long-winded answer to your question. I apologize.
No worries. So there's no worry that you'll have any kind of reverence for Bryan Singer as the X-Men director.
No,
because I feel like this is a real.
No.
I haven't seen Public Access, and I do intend to because now that I know about it, I'll be honest, I didn't know about it until a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
I'm so surprised that the person who makes this movie goes on to do that with their life. Like they're not bad movies, but it's not high cinema. And this, this debuted at Cannes. Non-competitively. But then he goes on to make all of these X-Men movies. I mean, I probably paid quite well, but it's just very,
Hmm.
very strange to make that jump. And so I think that
Yeah.
if you were a big fan of his other work, you might be expecting a different movie than you'd be getting. So it's good that you don't know him. He was also pretty much a Shiggets
Yeah.
and, hasn't worked since 2017 because of this.
Wow.
And then we go over to Kevin Spacey, and this is going to be the timely part of this particular episode, which is going to air in March, because Kevin Spacey has not acted or been seen by anybody since 2017
Hmm.
because of all the allegations. I mean, he goes to court in the United Kingdom on an extradition charge, and like 9 counts,
Hmm.
completely gets off.
Yeah.
They cancel House of Cards on Netflix. There was supposed to be a Gore Vidal movie starring him as Gore Vidal, also canceled.
Wow.
They film a movie called Peter 5'8". It gets filmed in 2021, shelved, completed in 2022,
Hmm.
and they've been sitting on it, waiting to see how long it takes for us to kind of get over our weird thing about Kevin Spacey because he was technically not found guilty. And they're going to push this American crime thriller on us on the 22nd of March. And I'm super curious to see how it lands and how people respond. Because when you watch this movie, you're going to be compelled by what an amazing actor he is. He
Yeah.
is very good in this.
Sure. Just a shame that he only. It's too bad that he didn't use his power. That he didn't only concentrate his powers on good instead of
Yeah.
for other means. Well, I mean, once again,
Allegedly.
Like I don't know all the facts. Like
Yeah, you have to put the caveat of allegedly on it, but when you're like, okay, so how many people was it? And you're like, it's close
Yeah.
to like 20. You're like, whoa,
Yeah.
what a
Or yeah.
conspiracy.
When it's a full room of people,
Yeah.
that's a little harder. That's a little harder to kind of be like,
Yeah, when you got enough
You know.
people that they could play soccer against themselves,
yes,
we're not doing well at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
do wanted to air that out as we watch this movie that has 2 people in it who are really not good people. And we talk about something in art a lot where you say, can you dissect the art from the artist?
sure,
I think the person I think of most foremost is Pablo Picasso because
Yeah.
people adore his art. And when you learn anything about him, you're like, what a trash human being.
yeah. I mean, I struggle with I mean, the longer we go, the more everyone is going to have to come to terms with that in some form or another. I mean, it happens everywhere. Like, I mean, talk about like there's a new documentary coming out about Nickelodeon. Like that's going to be on Netflix soon, talking about like all the horrific stuff that happened behind the scenes on a lot of the live action television shows that happened on Nickelodeon.
But I feel like obviously, but also, god damn it.
Yeah, and same thing with Ren and Stimpy.
Oh, God,
like,
yeah.
The art. Yeah, like that type of stuff. Just it's good that it's coming to light, and I think we all have to. Eventually, it's going to happen to everyone. I mean, especially as the world gets smaller, and more people feel like it's. I'm glad that people are talking about it. I'm glad the
Yeah.
conversation is happening. But like, yeah, and I'm kind of. Well, I was sorry. I completely as I derail myself from the point, but I was saying I understand because I'm a big. I was a very huge Lovecraft fan.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, it's a very classic case of being like. His work is really incredible, and he did a lot. He did a lot of things that I think get often overlooked in literature. But he's also a deeply flawed human being. He was considered very regressive by the standards of his peers, even back in the day. And I always like to joke the fact that, like, yeah, Lovecraft hated a lot of people, but he hated himself more than anything else. Like, and it's kind of a weird combination of having to believe that people can change as they get older if they allow themselves to, believing in that fact, and then also just having to look and see like, is there growth, is there identification, like what's, I don't know, there's a lot of nuance that I don't think I'm licensed or paid well enough to to offer any type of prolific advice on, but yeah, like I hear you on that.
There's a real double-edged sword when you look at this and you're like, well, people should pay for their transgressions. Some of these accusations go back to 1986 and this only came to light in 2017. But then also you're like, well, shouldn't there be a path to redemption? We don't just send people to prison forever. Like you're supposed to be able to rehabilitate. And of course, like you have to you have to atone and take responsibility for what you did if you want to be able to rehabilitate. So if you're saying you never did anything
Yeah.
and you're just waiting for people to chill out so you can make another movie, lesser so. But it is a very difficult thing to start to really enjoy pieces of art, especially movies which have so many
Yeah.
people working on them. So to expect everyone in the cast to be beyond reproach
Yeah.
is almost impossible. It becomes quite difficult. This is also a movie that has like I want to say one woman in it, but when you watch it, I really feel like you're going to be like, no, it's really more like 0.66%
Sure.
of a woman in this movie.
I mean, hey, like,
So-
I was probably the target demographic of this film when it came out. Like, oh, it's a guy's movie. I mean, like I said,
Mhm.
I'm saying this with zero context, so I could be way off, but I'm assuming, just the way that I made that same assumption about the Reservoir Dogs comparison. I have nothing to justify that comparison. I mean, that's just what I get based on what I've experienced with it in a tertiary capacity.
I definitely feel like Reservoir Dogs still gets thought of as a guy's movie.
Yeah.
It's because it only has guys in it.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of women that are like, no, I do genuinely like that movie. I do genuinely like both of these movies. I think they are very well written and very within a time period.
Oh, yeah.
It's fun because I like them, but then there's always this like bittersweet of being like, you would have never been asked to play. Like
Yeah.
you would have never been allowed to have that cool line. You would have never been allowed to be in that cool scene.
Yeah, it's a guys' club.
So it is it's like watching from the window and being like, oh, what a warm
Yeah.
Christmas fire these people
Oh,
have.
sure.
But I still like the movie. So, you can step back from these points, but I did want to give
Oh, sure.
voice.
Yeah, no, yeah,
to both
I
of those
appreciate
things,
that. I mean,
you know.
goodness gracious. I mean, especially at our age, like there's no shortage of that stuff happening. I'm sure you spit in the air, it'll land on 3 people trying to catch it and then getting in trouble for it.
Yeah, and people said to me, like, are you even allowed to talk about Usual Suspects anymore? And I was like, well, that's a bit much. It's like fucking so many other people in this movie who did a
Yeah.
genuinely good job. The writer of this movie stayed clean. Do you know what he's doing with his life? He's writing all of Tom Cruise's movies. He wrote The Edge of Tomorrow. He wrote all of the Mission Impossible
Yeah.
movies. Like, he wrote Jack Reacher, the first one, or Jack Preacher. I never know. I think it's Reacher. I think I just want it to be Preacher because I enjoy that comic series.
Yeah. Well, this is a weird thought that just popped into my head out of nowhere. So take with it as you will. But it's like one of the reasons why a lot of these troublesome people like get away with it is because they surround themselves with good people. You know,
Mm-hmm.
bad people know how to keep good people around to use them as a shield to prevent them to help enable them or to get away from stuff. You know.
Oh yeah,
Like,
no.
just as you're saying, you're like, yeah, this one guy did some bad stuff, but that guy's getting away with it by hiding behind all these other good people that are just trying to get a good job, just trying to do a good job making art.
Yeah, Christopher McQuarrie removes himself from Bryan Singer kind of once the X-Men stuff starts happening. He goes off and does Tom Cruise's stuff instead. And
Sure.
considering how this movie is lauded for its script and not its direction, I feel like this movie should be kind of saved from being canceled by Bryan Singer.
Sure.
And what he did, because it really is an interesting story, and the way that it's laid out is incredibly unique.
Yeah. I mean, and even to backtrack, I know we were talking about redemption. We were getting very deep on that, the art and the artist. I think a lot of it can, like, from an artistic point of view too, like, which can also kind of seem prickly when you look at it, but it's also like it's a kind of a juxtaposition or a contradiction of that humankind seems to be very prone to, is that like bad people can still make good things and good things can still come from bad people and bad things can come from good people. And it's just a matter of figuring out, like, taking what you have or taking what's given, drawing whatever value you can and getting the best you can out of it, regardless of the source, regardless of what it's coming from. Like, you can, I'm sure I don't really plan on experiencing this movie with any of this in mind. Like, I just want to watch it and take it on its own without the context of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's also a matter of like what work can you support or what work can you derive value from, and
Absolutely.
then take that, because that actually, to even bring it back to Lovecraft, like Guillermo del Toro is a great example of being like, oh yeah, like Lovecraft was a bastard, but and he would probably hate the fact that I'm doing all this really cool transformative work that I use as inspiration from, you know, like because he's kind of doing that. He's looking at all the good stuff that Lovecraft did and denouncing the bad stuff, and then using the good stuff to kind of promote an entire new reinterpretation of the genre that he created. You know, and the thing about Lovecraft is that like his estate came and went with him. Like there's really not much of a legacy outside of the body of work that he has.
It feels kind of like script upcycling.
Yeah.
Where like you're taking a thing that doesn't really have a function or form anymore, and you're taking it apart, and you're still salvaging parts of it. So it is environmentally favorite. Like,
Remember, I'm a steampunk artist. That's what that's all about. Like, I mean, like philosophically, that's why I really gravitated towards steampunk, because there are philosophical things about steampunk that I really like, that I wish were more heavily embraced by the mainstream culture, like that don't really get that attention, because mainstream culture steampunk's kind of a hard thing to kind of communicate to a wide variety of people, because if you ask 100 steampunks what steampunk is, you're going to get 100 different answers. So it's kind of hard to dilute that down. And unfortunately, when you ask 100 mainstream, like if you play Family Feud with steampunk, 80% of the people like, show me Wild Wild West, and that's what you're going to get as like your main touch point for steampunk, which is a shame.
Yeah.
But steampunk at its core is looking at the past, looking at what worked, look at the things that are good that shouldn't have been cast by the wayside, like making things that are built to last, making things that have that form and function, that live in dichotomy with each other in a good dynamic, or you know, treating, you know, like taking the mannerisms of the upper crust and the honor system of those things, and then extrapolating those from the context of, these are the rules that the higher ups used to use to beat people down. You can still use those and enact those, and then just treat everybody like that, and then make it not classist, or remove all the social context of that, and then make that as a way moving forward where you treat everyone as if they're kings and queens, or you you treat everyone like they're royalty. Then that's where that comes from, and that's where like the fantasy aspect of that comes through, like the selective operating of removing those good things from the pre-industrial revolution and carrying those into a modern day context.
Cool.
So which is probably why my brain goes, people do stupid and bad stuff, and sometimes they get away with it. It's just a matter of like taking the responsibility for you as a person of how much do you want that to affect you, how much do you allow that to affect what you put out into the world, and what you can do to either inhibit or to transform that into something that is more beneficial than it did to hurt people. You know?
So, yeah, well said. Oh my God, well said. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know, that literally just popped. Yeah, that just randomly popped into my head. I don't talk about steampunk that much anymore, because Wild Wild West happened, and I'm like, all right, I can't really talk about this with anyone anymore.
But that's an incredible way to frame it in a relatable and understandable way, because I do think you're right. When I first think of steampunk, the first thing I think of is the Isle in Joanne's that just has a bunch of cogs in it for some reason.
Yep.
Like,
because ironically enough, that the aesthetic that is supposed to be counter industrial revolution gets industrialized, and then that just becomes, it's so sad. Like, yeah.
Yeah, our farces are often that way. I feel like our oracle at Adelphi is always going to be a clown or a comedian, because I look at Matt Groening and I watch Simpsons episodes, and I'm sometimes like, but that happened like 10 years later, so why is our Nostradamus Matt Groening?
Well, it's because you said it, because like everything is possible in the land of humor. You know, that's where like I would argue almost like humor and sci-fi are kind of like the different ways that we interpret and extrapolate on the present to show up in the future. You know, and it's all done in the delivery or communicating of a message. It just stinks because now we're at this stage where like those things still exist, but they're now being crushed by an algorithm, or they are living in the shadow of things that they're like in the four most horrific words that really bother me are too big to fail.
Yes.
Everything. Yeah, we now live in a world where the majority of things that are controlled by entities that are too big to fail, and because of that, they do things that cause irreparable harm to people, but because they can't fail, what's going to stop them from stop doing it?
Yes, and that's exactly how I feel about the other edge of the do you let artists who have done horrible things make art? Like,
Yeah.
so here's Kevin Spacey. He didn't get, it's all alleged, he didn't get found guilty, but
Mm.
he's kind of too big to fail. So they're going to push him back
Yeah.
on us as an actor and keep making movies with him. And are we going to just be like, okay, I guess so? Because we do that a lot with many things in our culture.
Yeah, and because I mean, like not to this. I don't know where. Sorry, hold on a second. Where this soapbox come from? Let me get off
Yeah,
that thing.
right?
Dang, sorry. Does anyone need any Irish
Sorry,
Spring? Because I think I just found some.
Don't worry, the second half of this episode is really going to be us just talking about the movie,
Yeah.
because I wanted to get this out of the way, because if we didn't talk about it, I definitely think people would say, like, how did you have this episode, and not even give voice to it at all.
Sure.
So
No,
yeah.
I'm happy to talk about these things for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
like I think anyone who knows me knows that like I tend to err on the side of, like if there's bad stuff happening, I'm pretty anti that.
Yes, yes, I
Like
don't like that.
like I'm not I'm not here to support anyone that's choosing to hurt people or do things
Mhm.
that are designed to cause harm to people in any stretch of the imagination, which makes me a very boring person, I think, to a lot of people. But
No, opposite.
I'm just an idea guy. I just like making cool stuff with people and promoting that instead of
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, but thank you. But yeah, but that is an important. I understand why the importance of that is. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like I don't expect it to be a gotcha moment, but it's good context to have. I mean, like I
Absolutely.
said before, going in, that's become a part of the show. It just not by intent, just because of just the nature of
Mhm.
the format. It kind of precludes itself to that because most of the movies that we've watched are older,
Mhm.
and because so much time has passed now, it's important to have those contexts
Mhm.
over time.
Yeah, and I think if you're coming to this show as someone who might be like you, who hasn't seen The Usual Suspects and knows nothing about it,
Yeah.
you might say to yourself, like, I've picked this as a movie I'm choosing not to watch because of those allegations.
Yeah.
Which, if that's how you feel about it, obviously stay true to your moral compass.
Yeah.
So we'll just include it in as well.
Yeah.
But before we leave for you to go watch the movie,
Yeah.
I did want to end on a positive note
Please.
and ask you if there's anything in the movie that you might be looking forward to seeing. I mean, you don't know very much about it.
No, and actually, I think we kind of accidentally glossed over. I like, even though I said like I do have a lot of favorite movies. Like
Oh yeah.
I do try and like I'd like to think that as I've gotten older, like my taste in movies is very varied and weird. Like I grew up very much liking like a lot of very specific things, but I'm also a big fan of like all these other movies. Like I like movies that I think a lot of people might be surprised to hear about. Like I have my cabinet of curiosities, my library of films next to me, and a lot of them are
Mhm.
animated. Like I still like cartoons, like because
Mhm.
like I like Eon Flux. Like I love that weird phase of animation and from MTV that really that
Yeah,
like
the
from Wicked
Max.
Television. Yep, I have the Max. I've been trying to find a version of the head, but I just can't find it
Oh
because it's not like the animation was
no.
kind of like was not as strong, but like the story was still weird.
Yeah, it's just hard to find any of that
Yeah,
stuff.
but like I still like movies like Groove. Like there's a movie like it's a lesser known movie, but like one of like some of my favorite movies. Like I like Gangs in New York a lot, and
Mhm.
for like I would
Mhm.
love to like do a TED talk or like even I would love to talk about Gangs in New York and like how that's a movie in my mind that's aged like a fine wine because it still tackles a lot of issues culturally just as
Mhm.
Americans, just in America, like the fact that it's a movie that's based so far away, but there's still so much relevancy in it. Like there's just a really good opportunity to kind of look at that and then
Yeah,
point that
plus
forward. Like a lot of
Daniel Day
Scorsese.
Lewis is amazing
Yeah,
too.
it's so good. I mean, like it's and obviously Daniel Day Lewis. It's an amazing movie, but like also I'm a big fan of like I'm gonna say like two very weird movies that I don't think anyone really knows about. But there's a movie called Groove. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No.
It's a movie. It's one of the earliest films that Nick Offerman makes an appearance in. He plays a cop, and he doesn't even he has a mustache, but it's a fascinating movie. It was like in the mid-90s. It's a movie I watched at like 4 o'clock in the morning during an insomnia binge. But it was like one of the first movies I ever watched that I was like, huh, maybe the world isn't so shitty. like it's like I can give you like the general synopsis of it, but it's basically a movie that talks about it follows a number of people in the San Francisco rave scene in the 90s, like back when like jungle and like techno were still like brand new, and like the internet was still like burgeoning as a means of main communication. I can't remember any of the actors in it, but it was like a real low budget film. But it's basically about like, you have like all like your classic tropes of rave goers. And even though I was never really a rave person, I like the music because you know I was a very energetic kid, ADHD. Hi, and something else obvious for me to say that you probably can derive just from talking to me. But like it's an incredible movie that just follows a bunch of different stories, and it's very low stakes. It's not like crazy, but like there's some good actors that are still around. I just can't think of any of their names, sadly. I just know Nick Offerman is in it, like a very tertiary role, but it's a really good. It's just a really good movie. It's a feel good movie, but it just so happens to talk about people that just take drugs and rave all night, like in an abandoned warehouse. But then there's another movie that I like that's really charming called Micmacs, and it's from the director of Amelie, and Alien Resurrection. Um,
Yeah. Janae?
yes, and that's an amazing movie that I always like letting people know about because it's just an adorable. It's like a live action cartoon movie. It's just a very charming, like disarming movie. If you ever seen it, then you'll know that that's a very funny joke I just made. But like I'll lend it to you.
I would love it. I really love this director.
And then Lucky Number 11 I really like a lot too, which is just a random movie that I like. But like yeah, so I like those movies, but obviously I still like I'm a big sucker. Like I just finished watching Atomic Blonde before we started playing because I was like I need a mindless action film to watch. So I was like, yeah, so like I like all my obligatory like John Wick films.
Mm-hmm.
I still have like all my favorite movies from like Drunken Master and like all the old school martial arts movies from Golden Harvest, and then also the stuff from Donnie Yen and Sammo Hung's company, Dragon Dynasty. But like Ip Man, Ong Bak, like specifically Ong Bak 2 and 3, incredible movies. Oh. I'm a big fan of Jet Li.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, so I like. Yeah, there's a lot of like random stuff that I like watching. So like I'm very excited to watch this because I'm glad to know that it is not what I precluded it to be incorrectly. So can't wait to see what it's like.
It is within the action genre, so I do think you'll enjoy it. It does not have quite the amazing stunts of many martial arts films, especially not John Wick. But I do think that you will find yourself find an easy access point coming from those particular movies.
Can't wait.
Yeah, and you get to see some young other actors too. So as you go through it, you'll be like, "Oh,
I know one of the bald ones is in it." Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Yes, the
Stephen Baldwin.
It's Stephen. It's not Alec. It's Stephen. It's Stephen Baldwin, and he's so young and so cute, and he has the stupidest haircut of any human being at the time period. That little Caesar haircut with the like straight across bangs.
It's like what is it? Because that was like around the same era when he was in like the film with Emilio Estevez and Biodome with Pauly Shore.
Oh God bless him! How does he get to be in such a bad movie? So I was watching the movie last night, and I was going off because it's got Benicio del Toro, it's Kevin Spacey, Kevin Pollak, everybody who's anybody, and all of the Gabriel Byrne is somebody, and then there's the Baldwin brother, and you're like, how come he didn't parlay this into anything else, into better roles? He's so cute. He's a decent actor. What the hell? And you're like, oh, he also did Biodome because he wasn't selective, and he probably did too much cocaine.
Yeah. But hey, he had a resurgence when he played Barney Rubble in the Flintstones.
This is true. Let us not overlook such a
the American classic.
American classic. That's definitely on the AFI.
Yeah. Actually, I think actually the biggest hurdle for me is watching Kevin Pollak and not immediately thinking of Marvelous Miss Maisel.
It's because he's a really he's supposed to be scary. I do remember watching it last night and going, ha, Kevin Pollak gets to do something where he's a hard ass. All right,
That's awesome.
sure. Good for him.
Yeah.
He's still pretty funny. He still got hired for being funny. There's definitely that
sure.
aspect of it. So I think there's a lot to enjoy in those things. I did find out something so. I only watched this movie once, and I'll explain that in the second half. So this is the second time I've ever watched it in my life was last night, and I found out something so true to my life as a child that I now finally understand.
Oh.
My parents refer to Benicio del Toro simply as the guy with the eyebrows.
Huh.
And I thought, he's got big eyebrows. Maybe that's what they're talking about. Although if I was going to refer to an actor as the guy with the eyebrows, I would be talking about Eugene Levy. As soon as he comes into frame in this movie, you're going to understand why my parents, who met him for the first time by watching this movie, refer to him as the guy with the eyebrows. And that's my one little Easter egg to throw you that I can throw you for something to look forward to in the movie.
Cool.
All right. And I think we'll end here. We'll come back after Brett has watched the movie. And we'll talk about everything. I'm so excited. This is the least I've talked about the movie in part one because there's just too much to say. So we'll get to it in the second half.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of I know it makes the prime. Yeah, I know it makes the primer like a little hopefully nobody's
talk about the movie. Well, if they, you know what? That's like not knowing who the guest is or what movie we're talking about. Like you had to click on it. You know the format of the show. If that's your problem, just go to the fast forward. There's a 30-second button. You'll be fine.
Yeah, no, it's very fair. Yeah, I mean, it's I've said this before, even pre-show. It's always a pleasure shooting the breeze with you. It's always a joy. So I know it's hopefully people can understand that we're podcasting, but we're also just playing catch up because it's been a minute since we've talked. Not that long, but a bit.
Well, we didn't get to play D&D this week because we were off.
Yeah.
So we haven't spoken in a minute. Yeah, and we both have ADHD. So if you thought that we went off topic, let me tell you what, we were reining it in.
We're on our best behavior.
We have liner notes. We have a time schedule that we kept to, and we still met that time schedule. We still did all the things on the outline. So bless our hearts.
What are you saying?
I say he'll flip you.
He'll what?
Flip you. Flip you for real.
Yeah, I'm shaking.
Здравствуйте, I am back from break with Marvel.
Yep. No, we just got back from we're right now we're hanging out at Apocalypse Sow after watching Usual Suspects, which actually, the more we think about it, reminds me of a job we did many, many years ago that I don't think we can talk about publicly yet, but that was a fun time.
Yes. True Crime Podcast would like to have scoop on that, but maybe another time.
No, not with Siege still around. Nah.
I feel like we need to put an ice pun in here for you for this to be completely accurate. For people who are not wise to the game, we are back from the break and we're playing around with our silly voices from Starwell, and it's just it's too much fun. Although
thematically appropriate on a number of levels, considering the movie we watched, and then given our professional and connections with our friends.
Это правда? Я знаю. Я хочу говоришь как так. No. All the time. It's so much fun to slip in and out of silly voices. That's why we do Dungeons and Dragons. But we're here to talk about The Usual Suspects, and I'm just gonna come straight out the gate. Did you like it?
I did like it. I kind of, as soon as it finished, I kind of lobbed you a text where I was like, as soon as I finished it, I immediately went to rewatch the beginning because it's one of those movies that once when, not I guess don't want to talk spoilers, but we
are now in a spoiler zone. We cannot watch this part of the podcast. It's spoiled.
Yes, I am now free of the spoilers. Yeah, but it's a movie. It follows the narrative circle that is satisfying in the sense where you watch it, and then once when the context becomes clear, then you get to rewatch it again with a brand new knowledge of having followed and being like, oh, now I'm in on it. That's always a fun thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people talk about that, particularly with the movie Sixth Sense.
Yes. Yeah, the Shyamalanian, if you will, M. Night Shyamalanian.
People are trying to say you can see the twist coming once you know, which is kind of tautologically true.
Yeah, I think that's because I watched it. I was like, wait, it was that Kevin Spacey's voice in the front? No, it wasn't. Or if it was, then it was absolutely garbled to make sure that you couldn't tell who it was.
Exactly. Did you see the twist coming?
I didn't, which well, I eventually got there before it happened, but the lead up and then the payoff of the realization, like leading up to that, was done really really well. Like in that chaos, it was done really really well.
That's what I was thinking when I was watching this movie, trying to compare it to The Sixth Sense, because I think it has a lot more rewatchability than The Sixth Sense does, which is, kind of like, oh, so it was kind of there all along. Whereas the reveal in this is deeply cinematic.
Yeah.
That's why I was saying to you prior, like, make sure that you're focused in the last 20 minutes, because the reveal and the visuals that they use to accomplish that is, it's such a piece of cinema history. And as much as everyone knows the poster scene, they also know that scene with the coffee drop and the reveal and the particularly the steps switching to straight walking.
Yeah.
I remember I didn't get this, but people describe like you get a frise, like that's the moment when you get the goosebumps. So let me tell you my story
Please?
of having watched
Yeah,
this as
I'd
a
love to
child.
hear it.
I grew up in a kind of family that didn't really believe in movie ratings, and also movie ratings kind of slightly we slightly predate them. They sort of happen at the same time we're little kids, and they're really inconsistent. And PG-13 doesn't really exist for a long time as well. So my family was always just like, look, if we want to watch a movie, we're going to watch a movie. If there are kids present, that's their fucking problem. So this movie comes out. It's 1995. I am 10.
Wow.
I can't watch it in the movie theaters because I don't go to the movie theaters, and 10-year-olds aren't allowed into this movie. My parents don't see it. I think no, they do see it in the movie theater. And then I find it at Blockbuster, and I know that everybody's talking about it. My parents liked it, and I had a pass on my Blockbuster card that said, like, you give this kid whatever the fuck she puts on the counter. You don't say no. There's no ratings. The parents are fine with this. So I rented The Usual Suspects.
Wow.
I go back to my house. I'm like, just alone. I'm an 11-year-old kid now at this point, and I'm going to watch this movie. And I pop it in. It's about an hour in. So we're talking about, like, maybe the Pete Postlethwaite has been introduced portion of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad comes in the room, and Kevin Spacey is on screen, and he goes, shit, Kaiser Soze. And I look at him, and I'm like, what the fuck is wrong? I got so upset. And he looks at me, and he goes, no, this is your problem. This was already in the zeitgeist for over a year. You're late to the party.
Wow.
Not my fault. And I'm like, I am 11.
Wow. Yeah. You got harshed by a family member at just hitting double digits.
Yeah, get your shit together, kiddo. We want to stay current. So since then, like, anytime there's a movie where people are like, the ending matters, I like run to the movie theater and be like, don't ruin it.
Yeah. Wow.
And I have never seen this movie again until last night because I was so pissed off because I was never given the chance to be like, oh shit, it was him all along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I think he does some very sly ways in which, like, the voice at the beginning is not him.
Yeah.
And the acting on his part, like, he actually super glued his fingers together on that one hand
Oh, no way.
to really make his hand stay that way all the time. He even
Nice.
took his shoes and filed them down in the way that they would have been worn if he had a limp, so that his limp was more believable. Like,
Sure.
he invested in the world that was that particular character.
Yeah.
He is awarded a couple of times as, like, best villain of all time, top 100 villains, and I didn't want to tell you that in the first half because I feel like that might tip the hat that he is more important than he seems.
No, thank you for thank you for minimizing that, just because of the fact that that it definitely, though I started kind of working on something while having it on the background, but as the movie kept progressing, I realized another thing that I appreciated about the movie that allowed me to follow along, and then I was able to, like, without the influence, I was able to kind of interact and kind of glomp onto whoever whenever the focus would shift. But, like, the thing about it is that The movie is, I feel like it does a great job doing, like, giving you story, but then also treating you like an adult, giving your stories at 10 years old of being of experiencing this film as an adult. It doesn't spoon feed you the spoon feed you things,
Mm-mm.
but it doesn't spoon feed you information as a lot of modern films do,
Mm-hmm.
depending. Like, it really does. It requires you to really, like, tune in, like engage with it. And I really like that. Like, and it rewards you for doing so, I think. Because one of the things that I was going to say is that the thing that also keeps your attention is the fact that it gets up to a point where, like, the cuts between the story being told and the story unfolding are so seamless that it does take you, like, in some instances, it does take you a half beat just to catch up, being like, oh, wait, is this before, after, or where are we in the narrative on this?
Yeah. But as an adult, I was thinking to myself, like, wow, okay, so wait, are we inside Virgil's story that he's telling us, or are we inside the real world?
Yes.
You lose track of the narrator. So it's hard to tell even if you are a suspect of having an unreliable narrator, you lose track of who's narrating which scenes. It's pretty good.
Yeah. I think it would be the point. It's to drive home the point of how the deception is being utilized to undermine and escape, which is the exact theme of the movie that it becomes in the end anyway.
Mm-hmm. So this director, writer, singer, and McQuarrie, let me say, I always feel like I'm going to say his, it's just McQuarrie, and I don't know why I'm struggling with that one.
Yeah.
They said that they wrote this kind of in parallel to a film that we actually covered on this podcast,
Oh.
The Wizard of Oz.
Really?
Yes, they wanted to create a world that was not real, that was unrealistic, that was very fantastic, and put the reader or the viewer into that world.
Okay.
And then pull them back out of it to try and see if they could, mess with your concept of what did and didn't really happen. Because we have Dorothy's concept of what happens in Oz versus what actually happens in her reality. So it's not like a direct interpretation of that, but it's an interesting way to be like, wow, damn, people are upcycling The Wizard of Oz over and over and over and over, and it's something I barely even think about that much.
Or drawing inspiration from it in definite, in new, interesting ways, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say that now I'm like going through, I'm like, oh, well, who would be who? I mean, there's more than 4 characters on the main cast, but still, that's fascinating.
It's, I was also trying to think about, at the time period, how many other movies that we had where we featured heavily in a narration point that was not the protagonist and not someone who you could trust. Because when you're watching the movie, it really feels like Gabriel Byrne is the protagonist.
Yeah.
But we have the narration from the viewpoint of Virgil, which really is confusing,
Yeah.
But you accept it. All of these things, which is interesting because if you stop and you look at what's going on, you're like, wait a minute. But while you're in it, it's such a submersive reality that you never once stop and have to be like, are there Oompa Loompas singing to you? It's not a weird, but you do kind of think about like, we hear about these guys being so good at doing all these hits and all these heists, and yet they seem to kind of fuck up a lot in this story that we're being told.
And I don't know if it's just because of, like, in the leading up in the final minutes of the story, there is a moment where I'm like, and I think I have to blame this just on the kind of movies that I've watched, and how, like, there's enough movies where you're like, all right, like, how's Verbal getting out of this? Where I'm like, oh, where I got suspicious was how Verbal was slowly, like, giving out the right information of being like, how come you didn't shoot the devil? And be like, well, what if you miss? He's offering things in a way that is blatantly open and almost too true, where I'm just like it makes sense. It makes sense. But when he starts crumbling and falling apart at the end, where I'm like, this is uncharacteristic of this character thus far. So, like, it's almost like allowing himself to perform that way to avoid that type of to further, like, cement this story of, like, oh, I'm hurt now because I have been seemingly betrayed by this person that I think is Kaiser, you know, that was a really interesting thing.
Mhm.
But like as that was progressing, I could even see it
Mm-hmm.
in terms of being like there was something in that, not, I don't know if it's in the performance or the directing, but there was an air of the, is this true or not, which is cool, because then that really drives you in. It's that ambiguity, not necessarily like the underlying ambiguity.
Mhm.
Obviously the scene itself is supposed to play out the way it plays out.
I was gonna say it wouldn't work if it just plays straight and then after the fact you're told it wasn't the way you saw it.
Yeah.
That would be not very good filmmaking, in my opinion. That's kind of like,
Mm.
no, I feel like that's lazy detective work where, like, the mystery thriller, the person who was the killer was someone you've never been introduced to until they tell you they killed someone. You're like, well,
Yep.
that's not. How could I have figured that out?
Yeah. Oh, there's actually, that reminds me. So leading up, there was another point when I was watching the movie,
Mhm.
and the entire third act, or like leading up into like the last 20 minutes, like the whole scene like on the boat of the enaction where everyone's kind of getting picked off
Mhm.
and getting dealt with
Mhm.
while they're sweeping the boat. As I'm watching the entire sequence, and with the lead up on that, I was like, in my brain go, oh, Kaiser Soze's Batman. Where I'm like I felt like that. Where I'm like, I'm like, this is so fascinating as an idea.
Yeah.
Like this whole scene plays out like if like it's the opposite side of like, this is when Batman is like, this is like a Batman comic but told from the perspective of the bad guys. Like that's what it felt like in a lot of ways. Or Punisher, which would make more
Yeah.
thematic sense, because because everyone's getting shot and stabbed and killed,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, because we have Kaiser, whose family, he was killed. I mean, he, in the story, if we believe Virgil's story to be even close to true,
Yeah.
he kills his family as a point,
Mm-hmm.
which when you should see Heat, because it does pair well with this.
Sure.
The tenet of Heat is this line that it's guys who do heists versus cops trying to find them.
Mm-hmm.
And the heist guys believe that you should never have anything in your life that you can't give up in 90 seconds when you feel the heat coming for you, which is when you feel
Mhm.
the cops coming for you. So you can't be a guy who does heists and have a lover,
Yeah.
have a family, have an apartment that you give a fuck about. And I think that that's like kind of what is trying to be said by the Kaiser Soze character in his approach to everything.
Yeah.
So if he's defending his family's life by killing these Hungarian cocaine dealers, it does feel like a little Batman-y in that, like, well, he's a bad guy, he's a good guy. And with Virgil, you never know,
Yeah.
kind of until the end. So there's a lot of levels in which like good and bad is up and down in this movie.
And then treating Kaiser like as this mythical force
Mm-hmm.
that Batman is often portrayed as towards
Mhm.
superstitious lots of people, like as this boogeyman. That's also like one of the things that led me into being like, wow, this, because I felt like Kaiser sort of like was set up like very silently in the first half, and then kind of dropped out of nowhere, like in the middle of like the second job at the turn,
Mm-hmm.
where I was like, oh wow, we're really investing in this Kaiser Soze character, man. This is pretty intense. And then leading up to like the discussion and painting this pastiche, where I was like, oh wow, I wasn't really seeing this. This kind of felt like it was coming out of midair, which is why I will probably watch this again. Oh, also, I managed to find this on YouTube, which was very exciting.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. It was just like I just as a whim, I was like, let me check it out. It's old enough, and yeah, it was up. Like no big deal, pretty easy.
Fantastic.
So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I watched it on Pluto TV with a couple of ads. It wasn't too bad.
cool.
You can pay $3.99 to watch this movie if you want. You don't have to.
Yeah, like especially after after our discussion in the prequel of like the of the wrongs, I was like, no, stick it to them.
Yes, particularly so. Like, I never can you feel a little bit more comfortable than with like, well, that director and that lead actor. Nah, I'll steal that movie.
Right.
I was gonna ask you, how do you feel about the performance by that guy with the eyebrows? Do you understand why my parents describe him in that fashion?
Yes, I mean, it was definitely unique.
Mm-hmm.
I was not like, yeah, like it's like, especially when he was introduced in the halfway point. Like, from I remember, like it was definitely a much. Obviously, now having watched the entire movie, like it makes sense but because it also adds that mystery and also adds credibility to the idea of Kaiser Soze to begin with. It's a great support system for the setup of this system. Now, but that being said, like, yeah, I mean, it's just interesting. Like, I've seen him before. Like a lot of these actors I've seen in other movies. You know.
Oh yeah, this is definitely I mean, they're coming off of the win on Sundance, so they're pretty much writing their dance card for who they wanted to have in this.
Yeah.
I mean, you got even it was Dan Hedaya, who was like really hot at the time, even though not literally hot. He's kind of like Gene Hackman. That's always looked that way. And Chaz Palminteri, who looks like an actor who is in Casablanca. So I can understand why they chose to have those. They actually wanted Chaz Palminteri so bad.
Oh wow, Clark Gregg was in this too. He played one of the doctors.
So yes,
that's fun.
Great point. Clark Gregg was in this. He played one of the doctors. He's very young. He was considered to play the Chaz Palminteri detective role when Chaz Palminteri was not available. They were going to bump him up, but they kept him on as that. They were also looking at De Niro, Pacino, and Christopher Walken.
Wow.
Which would have been, I think, I think Chaz Palminteri is the perfect person to play the detective, because if it was anybody too much bigger, I think you might pay attention to them too much, and that scene would have too much weight, and then your body would be heightened in between. Like, the scenes that contain him are the scenes that are definitely not being narrated by Virgil. This is our now state. This is our now point. It would have been too much of a touchstone for me if it was Christopher Walken, as much as I love him. Going back to the Benicio del Toro thing, I wanted to mention his performance and why he talks like that is I find it kind of interesting. It's almost something that you see when you play tabletop games. You came over to my house, you and your girlfriend Babs came over and indulged us in joining us for a very long game called Twilight Imperium. Which is a tabletop game that takes like 12 hours to play. Sometimes it can take a little less.
Yeah, it is an experience.
Yes, there's a psychological phenomenon that will happen in the game where if you realize you are too far behind to win, you kind of just go crazy and you start killing people and just messing with other people. It's called win slaying. When you can't win, you just start slaying people. And Benicio del Toro realized that his character in this movie exists only to be killed by Kaiser Soze. Like, it's just, he's the red shirt. He's the first, like, it's the turn in the movie where you start to see that.
Literally. I mean, he has a red shirt. Like, he starts to show in a red shirt. So yeah, apt comparison.
So when he realized that, and he wanted to really make as much as he could of this because it was a really big break for him, he came up with that ridiculous accent and these eyebrows to try and really, really stick out with the role. And he says the reason why everyone is giggling in the lineup scene is not because he's farting uncontrollably. It's because that's the first time they hear him doing that accent. And the guy who is reading them the questions is the scriptwriter. It is McQuarrie. And the two of them are getting into such a back and forth because McQuarrie cannot understand anything that he is saying. And it's kind of genuinely pissing him off, but it's also kind of funny. And so, like,
it definitely reads, it definitely reads in the performance, that's for sure.
Yeah. So a little bit of interesting movie magic and an interesting choice from that actor. Though I'm very glad he does not continue to pluck his eyebrows in that fashion.
Yeah, actually, there was I should have realized, but there was a band that I used to listen to back. I made mention of my new metal roots in high school, but there was a metal band that I listened to, and I can't remember it exactly. I'll have to go through my backlogs eventually. But there is a band that actually samples the line "I'll flip you for real." Oh, it's not a new metal song. It's a ska band that I saw in college, called "Flip You for Real," like the name of the band, and then like they have the song, and they play that sample at the beginning of one of their songs.
So that must be super. I've seen this happen to Scott before. We were watching Carnival of Souls, and there's a line on the train where one guy says to the lead actress, "That's just what I need. Get me some girl who's off her rocker." And apparently that is like clipped in a Thrill Kill Cult song. And so like as soon as
Nice.
he heard it, Scott was like, because he had heard it a million of times, but never in the context for which it came originally.
Yeah.
So it really kind of gave him creeps.
Yeah, right. When you where you're like, oh, I wasn't planning on my brain being here for this now.
Yes.
Like, yeah, and actually, that I know that happened a lot, like the late 2000s / early 2010s,
Yes.
the aughts, I guess they say, of like hardcore music, or like where like Bury Your Dead, and like there was like a whole swath of like hardcore and like metalcore bands that had come out where every single song was just had a sample from a popular movie just wedged in there.
Yes. It's, it's a good place, especially with that transitions into trap. Like,
Mm.
if you want to do a drop, then the movie quote, then bop it back in. Like, there's no
Yeah.
version. You could put literally any movie quote in that space in between before you drop it back in, and it fucking works.
Yeah. No, yeah. It's an effective method for
Yeah.
sure.
It's
yeah.
Doritos. It definitely is satisfying, even though it's not good for you or nutritious.
No, not at all. But yeah, so like, and it's been so long that like, yeah, I don't think I'd ever seen Benicio del Toro like that young before, because I'd never seen any of his earlier work. I'm just used to him like being in his bigger roles later in his career. So like seeing him even then, I was like, wow, look at you cherub faced scamp. Like,
Yes, you little baby, you sweet little baby.
yeah,
I just saw him in Reptile, which is a fun kind of like mystery thriller.
Oh.
Came out last year. It's also got Justin Timberlake in it. It's on Netflix now. But he is significantly older. He's kind of converging with my dad as far as like what his face is doing. So to go back and be like, oh my God, you are a little baby is fun. Definitely is very, very fun.
Yeah. And actually, the idea just popped into my head. And it was another note that I wanted to make, where I was like, I wanted to see if my assumptions, my assumption that kept me away from Usual Suspects holds water. And I would say I'm 80%. It 80% doesn't. Which my assumption was like, oh yeah, Usual Suspects. It's just like Reservoir Dogs, but with different people. I would say that it's about 80% off. 20% there is somewhere it is a narratively spliced film. Yes. Yeah. That and it deals with camaraderie of a group of people committing crime. Yeah. But I would say the comparisons definitely change there. However, I can't remember the name of the guy, but the guy that they do the deal, like the middleman that they meet when they get to California from New York. The guy that gets him the secondary job.
Is that the
with
the guy who Kobayashi?
No.
Oh, Redfoot.
The long-haired guy that like the scene where they have the standoff, and Stephen Baldwin's character pulls the guns, but then his two friends pull guns behind him. Kobayashi is with him, but this is the guy with like the long blonde hair that's that with like the brown leather coat that's like that calls their bluff basically, and then gets in the car and then takes off. He's the one that Keith tells that he shivved, or that he took care of the guy in prison.
Oh my God, I can't place him. Yeah.
Well, he was he was the owner of the pawn shop in Pulp Fiction.
Oh shit.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm looking at this, like, why does this guy look so familiar? He's the guy that flicks the cigarette in Stephen Baldwin's face.
Oh,
yeah. And I was
wow.
like, oh, there is some Tarantino connection in here.
Exactly. Oh, one jump over. That's not even that far.
Yeah. So like, that's why I was like, I'll give myself 20%. I'm definitely not, I wouldn't give myself much more than that, because there was enough where where my assumption was incorrect, but there's enough where I'm like, well, there's still a couple nods in there. There's still some connection there, which is fun.
At its heart, it's definitely still a movie about a heist that goes bad because it's performed by a group of people who have not worked together and don't really know each other.
Yeah.
Which is like, that's a very big movie trope, that like you got the group together and they don't gel very well. The heist is not going to work. I would say Heat has a little bit more in common with Reservoir Dogs for that reason as well. I mean, although they do know each other pretty well, there's the introduction of a fifth person who no one knows before, and like, of course it's gonna go bad, guys.
Yeah.
Nobody vouched for him.
No.
But I do think that there were some points that you made that I didn't want to dive into too much without tipping the hand of how the movie winds up,
Yeah.
which is that this movie kind of has a negative association with like bro-y menchiness about it, which I think is just a misunderstanding. Like some people watch American Psycho and they think that the main character is someone to emulate.
Yeah.
Some people watch The Joker and see themselves in the main character. And I do see that sometimes people think Kaiser Soze is so cool because he gets away with it, because the performance is stunning,
Yeah.
and the end is so like stick it to him, that there are people who are annoying about this movie for the wrong reason.
Yeah. Basically romanticizing the concept of the diabolical mastermind.
Exactly.
Being like, oh, well, I might not be strong, but I'm smart. Like, I'm 3 steps ahead of you. You can't figure it out. Yeah. And I've seen that sentiment in many occasions across my time on this planet. And yeah, it's kind of, it's tough. Like it's the more introverted version of what you would see with like American Psycho or Boondock Saints, you know?
Boondock Saints, I think, is another film that gets misinterpreted and exalted for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Even though it is a great movie,
because like they take the wrong, everyone like they fail to see, for they whether willful or not, there is an ignorance of the criticism that's baked into the substance, and that is then ignored and then instead glorified because of like no it's cool, like no, Tyler Durden's like rat awesome, you know, he's gonna mobilize people, he can get the best out of you, he's like a drill sergeant, but he's not part of the enemy, he's not, no one can tell him what to do, he's freedom or whatever. I know I just blended two movies together, but
I'll throw in a third one. Look at how attractive and thin these people in Trainspotting are.
Oh God,
that actually was a real critique of the film Trainspotting, was that it increased the likelihood of heroin chic behavior.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's only if you look at the poster and you don't watch the movie.
Yeah. It'd be like watching Requiem for a Dream and being like, man, drugs are cool. And you're like, that's not, nope, that is not what that is. Nope.
I still can't get over the fact that while, was it Damon Wayans in Requiem for a Dream?
Yeah.
While he was filming that, at the same exact time, he was filming the first Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Of course he was. Wow. That man, that is, yeah, two ends of the spectrum.
How do you prepare yourself for every day when your day is going to start and end like that? I mean, I feel like that's why the Dungeons and Dragons movie wound up the way that it wound up, because they basically were like, they couldn't control him on set. He was so fucking wacky and so out of it that he would just say whatever he wanted. And the agreement that they eventually came to with him was, if you say the line on paper once, you can do whatever you want for any remaining takes that we need.
Yeah, exactly. We'll do as many alts as you want, and then we'll splice in the best. Yeah.
That's why they kill him off halfway through, because they're like, go back to Requiem for a Dream. Get the hell out of our movie.
Ugh. Well, I was about to say Damon's praises just because of the fact where it's like, yeah, I mean, because that was such like a out of left field with Damon, you know, not out of left field. I mean, he's done serious movies before in the past, but like that was like such a tonal shift in most of the movies that he's been known for. You know, it almost like dare I say, like, not to like invite like a Robin Williams comparison where you're like, oh yeah, the funny guy does like the deep dark, like heavy duty, hard hitting movie. Although I would say that it was done differently, obviously, and handled in a different way. But yeah, like I think it just speaks to like comedians. I don't know. I don't like to hold anyone on a pedestal, but a lot of like our best comedians, I feel like, have a natural capability of tapping into both like the comedy and then also the tragedy of human existence. So to see someone be able to translate that into a different medium is always fun. So I was like, hell yeah, Damon Wayans. You don't be a menace to South Central while drinking your juice in the hood. And Requiem for a Dream. Do that.
Do it. Nail it. Absolutely. I mean, it's a little bit like Steve Baldwin being in this movie and then doing Biodome the year after. you take what you can get.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that comedy is harder than drama.
Yes.
Drama's kind of straight down, especially if the scene is played to be sad.
Mhm.
There's one version of sad, but there's so many flavors on comedy and what is humorous
Yeah.
that it's so much more work to do a comedy than to do a drama. Also,
Yeah.
if no one laughs when you're doing a live comedy, that can kill you.
Yeah.
If no one cries when you're doing a drama, you just keep dramaing on. It's fine.
Yeah. For sure. 100%. Very few laughs I found in this movie, but that's okay. That's not what the movie exists for.
Yeah, the few laughs you get are from Del Toro's ad lib because I don't
Yeah.
think the script was written to really have any laughs at all.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin Pollak had some good lines in there for sure.
Too true. Yeah, he is a comedic actor.
And just by the nature, I actually really liked him in this movie too. Where I was like, oh hell yeah, he's kind of being like he's the wise ass, like he's being like the legitimate wise ass,
Yes,
just
absolutely.
way more cranked up on like the aggro scale.
I found myself actually genuinely sad when he gets killed at the end. I was like, no, I mean I know, but also no, he was the one I liked the most.
100%. It that like and I think like that once when he goes, that's when you realize, oh, all bets are off. Like this is going down now. Like he's the first to fall. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is what's happening. We're not doing a clean happy getaway moment in this movie.
You're not going to wind up with Mr. Pink almost getting away at the end.
Yeah.
And because he's the funniest. Though we do start knowing that Gabriel Byrne is pretty screwed. We start at point one, although we don't know that we start at point one. At a certain point, it kind of feels like you're driving towards that. But even then, it's amazing how much information you have and how easily you're still willing to be like, it doesn't add up to that, though, right?
Yeah.
I'm just in love with the scene at the very end when it comes together for the detective character, where Chaz's character is like, looking, I mean, it feels very nice and tidy. You kind of have the reveal of Gabriel Byrne's as Kaiser Soze, and you're like, oh, that was it. That was the ride. Okay, yeah, cool. And then it just becomes almost a different movie for a second. Like if this was a short film that was made into a movie, I feel like that and maybe 3 more minutes before of the interrogation could be an entire short movie that got fleshed out into this.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree that the way that they did that reveal was really fun, and even now, after all this time, like it's still a fun reveal, like a satisfying one, or one that you don't necessarily see coming for sure, which is super interesting.
There's a company that makes Kobayashi porcelain mugs.
Of course they
that
do.
On the bottom say Kobayashi.
That's amazing.
And they tell you they are very easy to break because they sell them to you with the idea that you'll drop it on the ground.
Wow.
Such a strange thing, but also at the same time, I'm like, it's beautiful that exists.
Yeah.
I have a very strange love of objects that, like movie merchandise objects that are just things that would have existed in the world of the movie. They're not branded.
Yes.
I really do like that.
Fictional branding I also have a weak spot for sure. Yeah.
And that's right up my alley. So, the fandom on this is really intense, and I do feel like now that you've seen it, you're going to have access to a lot of like, oh, they're making that reference right now. That's what we're going for.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to keep my eyes doubly peeled when I go doom scrolling in 5 minutes. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. No, right. Exactly.
No, it was fun. Yeah, it was definitely enjoyable. I'm glad that we landed on watching this one because I did enjoy it. So yeah, a pleasant surprise.
Yes. So I guess we'll move on towards our final 3 questions because I feel like we're kind of floating that way right now.
Sure. Yeah.
I asked the first question right out the gate, so we'll just re-highlight it. Did you like the movie?
Yes.
Yes. Would you recommend the movie to other people? And if so, if not, any caveats as to who and who not?
There are people that I would, well, because I'm kind of like the last person of the party on this one, I don't know who I would really suggest this
Mhm.
movie to.
Mhm.
Although I do know of one or two people that I could that I would be like, oh, so and so would enjoy this movie.
Mhm.
I wouldn't recommend it to my grandmother, or
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
or I wouldn't recommend. There are certain uh, groups of people that I don't think I would be like, you have to watch this movie. You know, like it didn't like shake me to my core, but
Mhm.
it was definitely for what it was as a new film to me that I've never seen before. I enjoyed it, but
Mhm.
it's not like it does not stack in terms of like the list of movies that I myself would be like
Mhm.
I won't hoist a banner for. But
Mhm.
unless if someone hasn't seen it or be like, oh, I haven't seen Usual Suspects, like if the role if I, as you've taken on the role of telling me to watch this movie because I've never seen it, I too will pay it forward and do the same. Would be
Mm.
like, you haven't watched Usual Suspects? You should watch it. It's pretty fun.
It's worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I would, yeah, and I'll be like, yeah, just watch it. You, yeah, I think you'll get it. Like,
Don't look anything up. Just watch it. I would.
exactly.
I would secretly, especially because the way I think this might be why I like it so much. The way that the reveal ending is shot is very reminiscent of Satoshi Kon's work, like Perfect Blue
Oh yes.
and Paprika.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Requiem for a Dream, because Requiem for a Dream is just a ripoff visually and contextually of Perfect Blue.
Wow.
I would love to see someone take this movie and make it into an anime.
Mm.
And just do it the other way
Yeah.
around. Just be like, fuck you guys, we're ripping you off.
Right. That'd be fun. I'd see. I would watch that.
It would be very beautiful animated. Although, you may be listening to this right now and someone's gonna be like, no, they already did it. If so, just let me know, because I would love to see that.
Sure.
My last question. Having done this, the what if I don't like it? How do you feel? Do you feel like it was worth the experience? Do you feel like you judged the movie incorrectly?
Yeah, I say yeah, it was definitely worth it. I like trying new things. I like watching all sorts of stuff. It was actually like even to hark back, like when we were originally trying to settle on a movie, like we bounced around to a lot of different movies. I
Mhm.
was like, oh, Princess Diaries or Unusual Suspects.
There was a moment where it was almost The Princess Diaries. I did watch it without you, and I was like, "No, I can't in good conscience tell you to watch this.
Yeah.
It's good for people who might, but it's
Well,
not
like
for
yeah, well, that was
everyone."
like kind of like the quandary that I ran into very early on when you were presenting the idea of when we were like talking about me going on. Where I was like, I don't know if I'm a good fit for the format of the show just because like there aren't a lot of movies or content that I'm abjectly against,
Mhm.
save for like very specific and obvious examples that that you would imagine, but like yeah, but because of that, I was like, yeah, I mean, I tend to watch a lot of weird stuff, and I tend to be pretty open and throw
Mhm.
stuff my way. So it's hard for me to find a movie that I would be actually averse to.
Mhm.
But then I was like, oh, I mean, but or like movies or the movies that I would be averse to, I know have been objectively proven to be bad. Like I don't miss a lot of good movies, but I tend to miss all the bad movies and all the so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So
I can't make you watch Twilight if you've been trepidatious about watching Twilight. It is not good.
yeah, no, exactly. I was like, I think what that even came up. I was like, yeah, I mean, if Twilight's good and I'm missing it or whatever, then yeah, I'll give it a watch. But like, yeah,
It's only good if you want to know how to make fun of it more specifically.
yeah, I don't need that in my life. I'm fine. I'm pretty
No.
yeah, I'm pretty confident at this point. If anything,
Yeah.
Twilight is a more fun is one of the funnier like bookmarks in Robert Patterson's career, which is
You gotta
great.
start somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like and yeah, like there's I don't remember who does it. I think it's GQ or Vanity Fair or Variety. Like they do a
Mhm.
YouTube series where they take like a very famous actor who has a new project and they go through all the it's called iconic, like all of their iconic roles throughout the course of their career.
Mhm.
And hearing Robert Pattinson talk about like his career is really fun because he goes
Mhm.
from Harry Potter and the Harry Potter films to like this thing, and then he talks about going into Twilight and how that was, and then immediately like jettisoning you off into these other like weirder like his career is fantastic in that way. Like when you watch
Yeah.
that video, hearing him talking about it.
Yeah.
But to rally myself back to the point is that yeah, I'm glad I did it. Very enjoyable. And yeah, I mean, like like I will always take someone's ferocious suggestion for sure. And actually, a prime example that I would think to shout out to one of my other close friends, Joe, who I think we all know from the Opinion May Vary family as well.
Mm-hmm.
Joe was the reason why I got into Avatar: The Last Airbender. And he kind of had to drag me kicking and screaming to watch it. Where like, and not that I was like abrasive to it. Or I didn't think it was going to be good.
The movie or the series?
Oh, the original animated series for sure.
Okay, good. Just checking. Okay.
Yeah. No, because he watched it, and then he presented it to me like maybe when I was like in my mid-20s, like 25, 26 or something like that, maybe 27. And like I was still watching cartoons, but like it was one of those things where like I just didn't have that need where I was like, oh, I'm plenty distracted with watching a bunch of other stuff. But Joe was like on me. He was like, you really need to watch this show. And I was like, all right. So like, and we were living together at the time, so he would drop it every once in a while, and it kind of like did a polite like, you should watch this down. He sat me down, got me started on the first season, and I believe I pulled an all-nighter and I watched it all in one sitting.
Whoa.
Like all 3 seasons, because it was that like the first season, it's like to set the tone, like gets really fun, and I was working on stuff at the same time, but like that the last season, like I was on the floor. I think like I probably went to bed at like 4 in the morning, and I was like, and like as soon as like Joe showed up again, I was like, this is the greatest piece of animation I've ever seen in my entire life. And he goes, right? And I felt silly because I was like, yeah, I didn't think it was gonna suck because like Joe has incredible taste in media and content, and we share a lot of the same interests. But like I just couldn't get my butt out of bed. I just couldn't do it. And like and once when that little push was, and I have the entire series. I have Legend of Korra, and it's probably it still ranks amongst like my top 5 favorite animated bodies of work like out there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So by doing a What If You Don't Like It, you found this thing you love.
Yeah. It did not happen with Usual Suspects, but it as intensely as I did with Avatar, with The Last Airbender.
Yeah, it's when I thought about asking you for stuff, I knew that it was going to be a little bit harder because you are affable. I think J. Andy World is another person where like he'll watch Slaughterhouse. He'll just watch. It's fine. He's cool. Whatever. If it sucks, it sucks. So those people are going to be very hard. I still want to have these people on as guests because both you guys are very interesting to talk to about movies and just hang out and talk to. So it's an interesting task for me.
Oh yeah.
There isn't quite as big as a payout because you guys have kind of raked out everything that is out there that is good to be watching. I am hoping,
or finding an enjoyment of stuff that no one else likes.
Exactly. Yeah, I am hoping to have something similar to this happen with our friend Alex, because through kind of masterminding together, Alex of Opinions May Vary has been backed into a corner of watching one episode of Last of Us, the HBO TV series. It'll be an exception because we almost exclusively do movies, but for this, it is important we do this episode because I also feel like it could be a standalone short film if allowed.
Yeah.
The Nick Offerman episode that won an Emmy because of his and here's the thing is I don't want to be like, ha, we got you.
Yeah.
We backed you into a corner and now you have to like it. I just want to be like, now like the thing we like.
Yeah.
Can we talk to you about how much we like it?
Because and I'm actually very thrilled because this has been a long-standing this is an internal conflict within the OMV board members because everyone else and this deals with video games, which is not film obviously, but once again, Last of Us is a very cinematic and oriented experience of gameplay. Like you are playing a game, but you are also unraveling a very intense story, which is why it was converted to a show in the first place. I'm not explaining this to you, KT. I'm just explaining this to someone who's not aware, who might be listening.
I'll play the cop that gets the exposition about how it's like to be a cop.
But
explain the law to me.
So Alex from day one has always expressed his dismay at playing the video game because the mechanics of the gameplay just really weren't up to his liking, and fair enough. Like I understand his woes to a degree, but it's like it's one of those things where like everyone else in our friend group have played the game, we played it through, and we had the experience of playing the story. And Alex decided that was not something he enjoyed, and we all wanted to fight him on it real bad, but we also don't want to like. But it's because of the fact that like we're just sad that he hasn't experienced something that we think he would enjoy. Whatever. So like, and now I think it's become a meme at this point. Really, like he just likes ripping on it because he doesn't want to.
Yeah.
And I respect that because like I'm also the stubborn guy. I'm the guy that everyone's like, everyone, you got to watch Game of Thrones, and I went, everyone in the world's watched Game of Thrones and everyone loves it. No, I'm not gonna. Like, I can't throw stones in that house just because I do the same thing. Everyone's like, you need to watch X. It's the thing that everyone's talking about, and I'm like, I don't. No, I'm not gonna.
No.
Why not? I don't know why. It's because my brain.
I did the same thing with Harry Potter. Refused to read any of the books. They were the height of fashion. No. And then I went to London with my family, and in 1 week I read every single damn book. I don't know why.
Okay.
And I was like, no, this is fine. It's fine. It's
Sure.
not groundbreaking, but it's fine, and I will consume
Yeah.
it.
I always like to point out now where it's just like, oh, yes, Harry Potter. Were you aware that a couple years prior to the Harry Potter series coming out with J.K. Rowling that Neil Gaiman released a comic book called The Book of Magic through Vertigo, and it is about a young boy with a scar, with glasses, who finds out that he has magical capabilities, and is then issued into a place to hone his skills. I'll send you a link to it. It's really interesting. Like there's a lot where you're like, wow, there's a lot of similarities here happening.
Bless his heart for not making a stink of it. Although also she turns out to be kind of a shiggets. Can we just focus on his thing instead?
Yeah, like I'm not
Right?
like
Let's
not to poo poo on stuff that everyone already is kind of aware of, or like, but to be that guy. But yeah, it's fascinating. I'll send you the link. But
I didn't know
also,
about that too.
to be fair, Neil Gaiman's version of the Neil Gaiman's story is definitely, it's on Vertigo. It's not meant for families. So that makes that to undercut my own criticisms.
Despite his doing Coraline and much later a lot of kids-based stuff, he's still stuck. It's funny because when you were talking about how people mistake you as someone who would be more X-Men or comic book oriented, and you were more, kind of dark comic, I was thinking that's how I got in as well. I got in through the existence of Vertigo and the Sandman comics.
Nice.
And once I saw that, I was like, oh, and somebody gave me a copy of Preacher, and I was like, whoa, this comic books get weird, and I'm here for this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It even and it's even to your point, like when I talk about comics, I actually have a hard time finding people to like really shoot the breeze with on the type of comics that I like. Although I do share a lot of favorites with the OMV crew for sure, like especially in the indie comics titles. But like, there's not many people that I can be like I can shoot the breeze with like on. Grant Morrison's run on Doom Patrol was real fun. Like, there's not a lot of people in my sphere that really like talking about crawling from the wreckage or the painting that ate Paris. So that's kind of like a bum out. But like, I mean, there's still like really great, because I'm also the guy that like I like to support independent artists. So like when I go, I'm actually supposed to go to Comics and More tomorrow. I've decided I'm going to because I would like to. I haven't been in a while. I got to pick up my pull list. But like, I will be the one that goes up to a shop, sees what's new on the shelf I've never seen before, and if it's a number one by like, and I've never heard of the publisher, I've never heard like the story or anything like that, as long as it has nothing to do with the big two, I'm like, all right, if there's like a couple issues and like the album art, like the cover art looks good, I'll give it a shot. I'll give them the sale. Like I want to keep, I want to keep promoting and supporting people making stuff I've never seen before.
Do you know, that's a friend of mine left a movie review on Letterboxd yesterday that was like, a lot of people are giving this movie 2 stars. I feel like I'm going to have to give it 3.5 stars because I want more movies like this movie.
Yeah.
While this movie was deeply flawed and had some problems, I can see where they were going, and this is such a unique voice that I still think we should amplify it and support it. And I do the same thing. I really like that. Horror, I think, does a lot of that, where they're like, look, you can be flawed, but you tried, and the community wants to enjoy a movie like Slaughterhouse.
No.
It doesn't have to win an Oscar for screenplay like The Usual Suspects.
Yeah, and I'm all for that sentiment. I think that's really awesome, and it's actually, it also reminds me of, like, it's a Patton Oswalt bit, but you also see it repeated in earnest in a lot of circles too, where it's like every movie that gets made is a miracle.
Yes.
Every movie. Patton Oswalt always likes to lighten the mood with it, because he talks about the movie The Bed That Eats People, because he's just like, someone had a moment of had a crisis of faith writing The Bed That Eats People. The guy who wrote the guy who wrote The Bed That Eats People was up at 3:00 in the morning questioning his existence, and decided, no, I must finish The Bed That Eats People, and then I must hire a crew, and then we must schedule it out and spend lots of money to make this movie happen, and then you do it.
Yes. And even this movie, it's like lauded. It's a script that gets taught for script making. It's given awards. It started out as, hey, you know what would be a cool poster? Like, that's where our starting point was. So don't feel like you have to start lofty to end up lauded, which is, a really big thing. Back to our main point in part one about, like, don't let perfect be the enemy of letting your art exist at all. Like, not even good. Like, you just keep that shit inside. Don't do that. You could secretly be sitting on the next Usual Suspects, even though you're just like, I don't know, this looks cool.
And actually, there is something to be said, like, done is better than perfect. And there is also something to be said that I think often gets open, like, the ability for something to become ambiguous, I feel like is a method of production that is often balked and scoffed at for fear of losing the audience. Like, and especially, and like, I don't want to be a cranky old man here, but it's just like, we now live in a time where there's a lot of movies being made, and granted, this normally applies to most films that deal with financial benefactors and stuff like that, and this is an issue that has plagued all great, like, Blade Runner famously, where you have Ridley Scott going to war with producers, being like, we don't understand this movie, we're going to make 3 different cuts of this movie. Being like, I have the idea, I want to execute the idea the way that I want, and if it's done in a way that it doesn't spell everything out rigidly for the audience, like, then they fear that will confuse the audience and then make them not want to watch it, and then you don't get your ROI. And that's really the only reason why people balk at stuff that is not, like, cookie cutter, die cut, spoon fed content to someone, so that way you can make sure that they follow. Those types of things, I feel like, really get in the way of making art that can be open to interpretation, which I really like a lot. So,
and this movie, even in 1995, I think when you look back at this movie now, it feels very milquetoast. It feels like a very American movie, it's classic cinema, but, like, it premiered at Cannes. It was not a movie that mainstream Hollywood wanted to make in 1995. I don't think it's a movie they want to make now either, because you're right. They want to stick with that, like, the IP that has given ROI. We want to do all of these comic books because we know there's a certain amount of people that are going to see them no matter what we do. Madam Web doesn't have to be any better than the base number of people who are just going to show up because they're going to show up.
Yeah, we're going to make our own versions and find these other people do their interpretations of the content, so we don't actually have to pay any of the creators who generated this stuff an actual compensating salary. So I'm not trying to be salty. It just comes out that way.
No, but when you start to dissect some of the choices that get made, I think people forget, like we said earlier, so many people get involved in the making of a movie. It's very rare to have a situation where the movie stays untouched.
Yeah.
And so you ask, like, why did this wind up being like this? That was stupid. And, well, dig a little, and you might be surprised to find out that there was some hard reason as to why something very specifically had to happen. Like, oh, that character had to be written off because so-and-so had to go shoot something else. Or, they ran out of money.
Yeah.
It's incredibly rare to get to just make and do whatever you want. I think that's why some people like Tarantino wind up becoming their own production houses with the writing and the directing and keeping it all in house. Because if you look at the original script for True Romance, it is a lot different than what you wind up with on screen,
Yeah.
for better or for worse. And I think that those experiences made him unwilling to continue to exist in the world that we're talking about. And like, it's so hard to even just get to break through.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to play the game.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and like, and to even counteract my own sentiments on it, like the access that we do have now is in this brand new digital technological age. Like there are some really great benefits to it. Like I found a lot, like not most, but like I know a lot of people that have found like a more broad example would be Corridor Crew, where you have a bunch of people that love special effects, love choreography, and stage combat, and like they've managed to make a business for themselves doing film special effects analysis, and then they also bring on people that they like working with, that work with them, working with their friends, and then because of that exposure, they then get plucked from the ether and then get to work on Marvel productions or whatever big productions you want. And that's super awesome and exciting. And I'm glad that there is a way to go from an unknown to finding the right people to get the thing you want made. Like those are really awesome. But I know it can be a little bit more challenging from a directorial or even an editing or something where you're not facing the camera, not talent, like
front of house,
on camera talent, basically. Yeah. There's not a lot of ways for you to do that to become a good like boom mic operator, or to use or like a support crew or something like that, or a rigger.
The people who win the Oscars on the day they don't even telecast.
Yeah, exactly. Which is still, I think that they still really don't do anything for stunts. I think, is that true, or did they finally?
Oh, they have added stunts into the Screen Actors Guild Awards.
Yes.
After petitioning, your representation within the union has increased, and now you are covered under multiple different aspects of it. And so you are now given an ensemble stunt award. We'll see who it goes to this year. I'm unaware of the nominees as I speak to you right now. I do know that Mission Impossible is one of them, because it's any year that there is. But they do a really good job on their stunts. As much as I want to make fun of a movie like that, if you come in to watch just stunts, it's gonna be fun.
Oh yeah.
And that crazy motherfucker Tom Cruise is gonna actually try and do a majority of them. So that's awesome.
I mean, just plane real quick, no big deal.
If he's committed, like there's something I really love when I'm watching a thing and I can tell there's joy in the actors. There's a love of being in that moment, regardless of what the scene is actually about. Like the show What We Do in the Shadows, the television show version of it.
Yep.
There are certain scenes where it feels like there is such joy in the actors. There's an episode where Mark Hamill plays a vampire, and it's such a joyous, like, oh man, they're just fucking around and they're taping it.
Yeah.
And it feels effortless. And that's my favorite form of acting. It's almost like they've hit the zone when you're watching Michael Jordan play basketball. Like, oh, this is talent at the height of its talent in the most effortless place it could be.
Nice. Yeah. I dig that.
I feel like you see that in the performance that you get from Kevin Spacey in this.
Yeah.
It's a real pain in the ass, this movie, because now you know how good of an actor he can be.
Yeah.
But also, like, man, you're a really shitty human being, and I'm not sure I want to hear from you anymore. Way to waste your talent and your power and be insidious, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, not wrong.
Yeah.
Not wrong.
I don't want to end on such a sour note, but we are approaching the end of the episode.
Sure.
We're hitting our time limit. I do want to thank you, as I thank everybody, because I feel like, Jesus, you came on this show and you talked to me about a movie that you were like, yeah, I don't really want to watch that movie. And then you do it anyway. And I'm like, damn, that's a good personality trait.
Yeah. And like, to harken it back to even the front half, like we were talking about, like creatives and working together and helping each other. And like, it's like, for me, like as much as I work by myself on projects, I'm working on a number of them now,
Mm-hmm.
and which I've already said about. But like, I like working on things with other people, like because like I
Yeah.
spent 15 years in amusement in the theme park business, where I met a lot of my lifelong friends, and like the like you learn the work ethic of like making a product or working on something, and when you're working on something with your friends, like you develop that dynamic, that bonding, and I like pursuing and helping people in those types of projects because it harkens me back to those days where like where you show up, you're making something with your friends you're making something you enjoy, you're doing it with people whose company you enjoy. So I'm very thankful to be holding up the tradition with you, and I'm very thankful and grateful for you to even include me in that process. So yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet. So that's the nicest thank you back I think I've gotten so far. I really appreciate that. Well, it's effortless, and I hope that people can feel the joy that we were having just sitting here chatting with each other
Yeah.
about this movie when they listen to this episode.
Yeah, I think so. Like you and I, like we get into weird, not weird, but like, well, yeah,
I
weird.
know.
We get into like these fun tirades too whenever we talk, and I think we
Yeah.
have like a good rapport. So I always like having like the nerd out sessions with you. So to have it recorded, hopefully people like listening to it. But I like listening to you talk and bouncing ideas off of you. So yeah.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I do know that I can always come to you with probably like the weirdest movie or the weirdest TV thing. And if you have, most of the time you're like, yeah, I've seen that. Uh-huh. But if you haven't, you're like, ooh, tell me more. And
Yeah.
that is a true friend to always have someone, like you said, being a golden retriever, like, oh, cool, let's talk some more.
Heck yeah.
Like Mr. Peanut Butter, as much as
Yeah.
he is a difficult character at times, I do find myself being like, man, I should be more like Mr. Peanut Butter.
I'm the face of depression. Okay.
And the running joke that they have about the banners always being incorrectly misinterpreted is just like the joyous level of obtuse humor.
So good. Yeah. It is very brilliant.
All right. So that is a big recommendation for BoJack Horseman if you haven't seen BoJack Horseman.
Fair.
And
Yeah.
also a recommendation for The Usual Suspects
Yes.
from our guest.
Yeah, definitely worth a watch. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's a fun one.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys so much. That's the end of this episode. As always, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
How do you shoot the devil in the back? What if you miss?
Before I sign off, I do want to take a second to answer some of the questions that we left hanging that we were unsure of in both parts 1 and part 2. In part 1, we were unsure if the X-Men movies that were done with Bryan Singer were done with Sony. No, they were not done with Sony like I thought. They were in fact done with 20th Century Fox. Disney and Marvel have always owned the rights to all Marvel characters, but before Marvel opened its own studio with Disney, they gave extremely broad movie licenses to 20th Century Fox for X-Men and Fantastic Four, and then Sony got Spider-Man and Hulk. In part 2, Brett was unsure of the name of the character that the group meets when they leave New York and they go to Los Angeles. It was, like I thought it was indeed, Redfoot. That was played by Peter Green, who is also playing Zed in Pulp Fiction. And finally, we wanted to know, we simply couldn't yet know because it hadn't yet happened, we were wondering who was going to win the SAG Award for stunts this year. And the SAG Awards have already happened, so I do know the answer. The answer is the award for Outstanding Action Performance by a Stunt Ensemble in a Television Series was awarded to HBO's Last of Us. Alex, you're going to have to get ready to watch something amazing. While the Outstanding Action Performance by a Stunt Ensemble in a Motion Picture went to Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. Like I said, those guys don't mess around. They are really incredible stunts. I hope you had as much fun listening to us as we did have chatting this week. It was a really easy episode for me. I love when I get to chat with people who I would normally have these conversations with if we were not using this, whole structure to force us to have them. This is nice. It's like having an excuse to go to the gym. You were supposed to do this anyway, you wanted to do this anyway, and now we've set this whole thing up to get you to do it. And I appreciate, of course, anyone who's listening to us. It is really a kindness that you are supporting this show and just joining us for these conversations. I know that I am so thankful for that. So thank you. Of course, as I always say at the end of this, check out the liner notes. They're gonna have stuff in them. And the stuff that they're gonna have is all the ways in which you can see Brett. Go check out his art. Go purchase a pin. I know I have several of his pins. This is a really fun thing to get to do now. Put them on your lapel. You get to start a conversation. It's a good icebreaker. And of course, join him on Instagram. That's where you can see his stuff, see his prints, get an idea for his type of art, and just support him in general as an artist, because he is one of the best cheerleader supporting artists I have ever met. He is the kind of person who wants to just hear that you're doing your thing and cheer you on, even if it's not exactly his thing. And that's a wonderful trait to have in a person, and it's a wonderful trait to have in another artist in your world. So I want to stop gushing about the guest that we had today and just tell you I appreciate you. I hope you're having a good day. Next time, we're going to have another really close friend of mine. It's Jared Skolnick. We're going to talk about a movie that is ingrained in my genetics, ingrained in the genetics of anyone who is even close to my age. We're going to talk about Goonies. We're going to talk about Goonies with someone who is a gigantic Spielberg fan, but has not seen Goonies. Sorry to get loud on you. It's just exciting. Jared is a writer-director. He is someone who often talks about film. So to get him in front of a microphone and have this recorded is a delight for me, and I hope it will be a delight for you. And again, one more time, I hope to see you live on the 10th on the YouTube feed for Movie Night Extravaganza so we can support the Oscars. Well, maybe not support the Oscars. They don't really need our support. Support the actors who are getting, hopefully, deserved awards. I hope to see, I want to see Jeffrey Wright win is my problem. He just won an Independent Spirit Award, so that's fine. But I would like to see him win. I'm willing to accept Killian, that Cillian boy, but I really just don't. I don't want to see Oppenheimer win Best Picture. But that is me going off, and you can hear more of me doing that and other people alongside of me if you join us on the 10th on that YouTube channel for Movie Night Extravaganza. All right, guys. See you later. This has been What If I Don't Like It with your host, Katie Baldessaro. See ya, Space Cowboy.